both sides of the doors as you walk in. That will just help our city recorder get everyone's name correct, and hopefully sometimes in the spelling. So we want to welcome everyone out to the Highland City Council today on July 16, 2024. You'll notice that we are missing Kim Rodella. We do expect that she'll be joining us here a little bit later in the meeting. We also want to recognize Heather, that has taken Stephanie's spot here as our recorder for the meeting tonight. We'll begin by having an invocation by Councilmember Ron Campbell, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance with Doug Courtney.
Our dear Father in heaven, we're very grateful, Father, for our many, many blessings. We're grateful to live in this beautiful city and in a land that is governed by a constitutional republic, and appreciate and love the residents of Highland and our opportunity we have to serve. We ask Thee to be with us, be with those who have things to discuss, that they will have Thy influence to be with them, and that we will have Thy influence as we hear of their concerns. We express our gratitude for all that we have, and do so in the name of our Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As we look across tonight's agenda, we do have two items that are public hearings. And so during the public hearing, we will have time for the public to be able to come up during that time. We will have a public hearing for the school district, the Alpine School District proposal for an interlocal agreement, and we'll have a public hearing on the Urban Deer Program. So if you're here for either of those two, we will give you time during that item of discussion to be able to come up and discuss with the council. As we look across the agenda, there are no other public hearings other than those two. So I'd invite, if you're here to discuss with the council on any other item that might be on the agenda that's not a public hearing, they come up during the unscheduled public appearances. It's going to now be time for that, to have an unscheduled public appearance. We'll ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes, and if you'll come up and make sure you state your name clearly so our recorder can make sure they have that. So at this time, we'll now open up for unscheduled public appearances. So if anyone would like to come up and address the council.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Brian Irving. I own a property on 4922 West, 1100 North, or SR 92. We've got a business that's called Tile Ram. I don't know if any of you have heard of that. We're seeking a code amendment that would allow us to have employees that are not resident of the residence be able to park their cars and get in the trucks and go to work. I'm just wanting to drop some information tonight to all of you. This will come up in the next council meeting, and just want to see if there's any questions that you might have, and I'll leave this with all of you so you can get a hold of me if you need to.
Just so you're aware, once we take that, that now becomes part of the public record. Just they'll put that in the packet.
Yeah. Should I hand it over here, or do you want it?
Why don't you go ahead and give them to the council? And do you have an extra copy for our recorder? Okay. Thank you. And this will be a discussion item tonight, and they'll be coming forth in the council later on. So. Okay. Is there anyone else like to come up and discuss with the council?
My name is Paula Forbes, and I would like to talk just a little bit, just share my thoughts about the school district split. I have kind of a unique background. I moved here 30 years ago with my family. We came from another state, and that had some challenges with like older populations that didn't want to vote for things that would help the younger populations. And so school busing was cut, and no new schools, no upgrades, and so that was discouraging. So we came here to Highland, and we found when people told us we were in the Alpine School District. I grew up in Sandy, by the way, but then we moved out of state. The Alpine District, it was like, hooray, we've got this great district to move to. And it was well run and good performing. later on, I became a teacher in that district. So I taught for 25 years, but I am now retired. But my grandchildren go here, so I still have an attachment to the district. I followed closely from all those vantage points for the district, the meetings that the district had with the company that they hired. And the number one recommendation was that we stay together because we're stronger because of resources. We have the busing, we have the media center, we have the special ed programs, and I did teach special ed for 10 years. We have a lot of good things with this district. The second option was to go to a two-way split because the others were not as economical for us as taxpayers. And so I can understand that split and that might be a good way to go because I have family that teaches in Jordan, and they were part of that Jordan Canyon district, so I've spoke a lot with them because they have that same issue of the north and south growth. And they said that in the end, that has turned out to be a good thing. It was very difficult at the beginning, but it has helped them to be a little smaller. So I don't know whether it would be best to stay together or to do the two-way split, but I worry now that that option has been taken away by the legislature. And we've done the city coalitions, or whatever they're called, with the little city groups, that will become small. And we left all the people out in Orem and Vineyard kind of hanging. So I hope that there's a way that maybe you can work together with the other cities to either get it to be back on the ballot as a two-way split, with the option of a two-way split, or a whole keeping the district together, so that those are the two options, because they would really serve the community, the teachers, the students, the people the best. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi there, Council. My name is Louis Gunter. I'm in the Canterbury South neighborhood. I've emailed you before when the speed bumps went on Canal Boulevard. And thank you, Councilman Courtney, for letting me know it was up on the agenda tonight. Just a couple facts as a means of follow-up. I did voice kind of my concerns about how important Canal is and how much we love that it's finished. It's incredibly useful for our family to get, I've got teenagers that go to American Fork High School and to go to the temple and go shopping in Cedar Hills. It's a great resource and great road. Anyway, so express my concern about the speed bumps going in. I always thought it was a little bit strange that it was a 30-mile-an-hour road. As it is, it's incredibly wide. And so I did a little bit more fact-finding. It is one of the widest roads in Highland. It has, in addition to the standard 12-foot lane, it has a 13-foot shoulder and a 7-foot space between the sidewalk and where cars are driving. So it's a total of 20 feet between cars and humans. Compare that to Highway 92, which has a 10-foot shoulder and a 5-foot green space. So it has 5 additional feet beyond what Highway 92 does, which is obviously a 45, 50-mile-an-hour road with a lot of businesses. The other comparable road is Alpine Highway, which has a 22-foot space from car to sidewalk, but that includes a 12-foot bike lane, which means you're actually a lot closer between people and roads, or people and cars. So I think that was kind of what was tickling my brain about like why 30 felt really slow. And then when the speed bumps went up, I was like, what is going on? So just wanted to voice my concern about keeping the speed bumps. The biggest problem with speed bumps is obviously just wasted time. It doesn't seem like a lot when you're driving along and you have to slow down, but I ran the numbers. I'm a data guy, and Highland City is wasting collectively about 3,300 human hours every year that those speed bumps are up. So it is kind of big on the aggregate. I've been dipping around in UDOT and looking at stats of like what a speed bump adds, and it's significant in the aggregate. I know that I and my children have sometimes gone up to 10.4 because we just don't want to do the speed bumps on Canal. So we'll drive farther to not go on them, which kind of defeats the purpose of having a great through road. So yeah, I just want to make the case for taking the speed bumps down, and additionally potentially doing, there's a study called an 85th percentile speed study. That is a way to, it's kind of considered best practice of how you set a speed limit for a road, and just maybe wanted to encourage the council to consider doing an 85th percentile road or speed study so that we could set a speed limit that feels safe, obviously, but also considers the needs of letting Highland citizens live their lives. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name's David Lamb. I'm a resident on Canal Boulevard. All my kids have grown, so this is not something that is kid-specific, but it's something you should consider. In relationship, all you guys know where this is going. For years, this has been an issue. Councilmen have come in, they've done little studies, and then they've ignored them or left office, or the city engineers have moved on or quit or been fired, and we restart the cycle. In your original master plan, it states clearly, road, misdesigned, dangerous. It's on the deal. Steve Roberts brought it to the attention years ago. Now, for my fellow resident in Canterbury Circle, there is sidewalk problems there because they're not continuous down the entire canal. So the issue is those that live close to it have made observations about the speed. Now, we're not talking about little speeds. We're talking about 60, 70, and 80 mile an hour speeds. We're not concerned about reducing the speed to, let's say, 40. We would be perfectly happy with a higher speed limit if we could avoid 50, 60, and 70. Okay? So this isn't an issue of on the margin. How many other roads in Utah or Highland have had 6, 7, or 8 known accidents where cars have ended up in yards? You know them. Some of you have visited the aftermaths. Okay? City council after city council have done studies. Where was the study on the crosswalk location that was promised by the previous administration? Nowhere to be seen, no follow-up. Speed studies have been done, not referenced in this previous motion. The sidewalk is not complete. It's dangerous. The county and the people who own the canal, there's remedies of routing people up on the pedestrian path and around the street. People don't use it. Did anybody mention the ad hoc crosswalk by the end of the fence? No. So the staff sets up a test and does a speed bump versus a speed table. That's a 15 mile an hour speed table. Then posts a sign right there. It says, hey, if you don't want to be slowed down to 15, call us here and complain. Of course, 85% respondents. You could have got 99 if you put a bigger bump in. Even us locals who use it all the time would be happier with a 30 mile an hour speed bump. I'm just saying that it's manipulative, what's being done, and it should be reconsidered, or an alternate speed mitigation program proposed. I'm out of time.
Thank you, David.
Hello, Council. Wesley Warren, Highland resident. This is in regards to the district split. I think I mentioned this a while ago, but I just had a chance to talk to someone a couple nights ago who oversaw the Jordan School District split from Jordan to Canyons, and he was intimately involved in a couple ways in charge of it. And he asked for an update from me about what was going on. I told him what I knew, but he reiterated to me a couple of things in hindsight that he wished that someone had told him, that they wished that they had focused more on. And one of them is constant and clear communication and transparency with all parties involved, especially with residents and teachers. There were a lot of concerns from teachers about how this would affect. I mean, I think you know all the concerns, same concerns that we have now from teachers and staff and administration, and lots of concerns from parents. And they knew that a lot of these concerns would be addressed, that they wouldn't actually be a problem, that they had everything in hand. But the teachers and the parents and a lot of people in the public, they didn't know. They didn't have that inside track. and he wished he would have just put down some thoughts every week and sent out an email blast or something, just to mitigate a lot of the fear and the uncertainty. The other side of the equation of that communication and transparency was just within the organization. After the split, he said that there was a couple $1 million worth of legal fees that they had to pay, just because it was such an acrimonious affair between Canyons and Jordan. He said it was horrible, and so much of it could have been solved by just better communication within the district. He said that at times it was like watching a slow car crash and not being able to do anything about it. It's like, obviously, if you just swerve or if you do this or this, like, you can avoid all of this. But he said it got to the point to where they were beyond communicating, beyond repairing some of the rifts. So those were two takeaways. It might not be new information, and he did tell me that a few months ago, and I think I shared a bit of it. But it was just nice to hear that reiterated, and I've been really impressed with the amount of information and transparency so far. And I don't see behind the scenes as far as what's going on within the district, but something to keep in mind. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr.
Mayor, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Did you cancel the public hearing
No.
on the school district?
So if
Because
you're-
that's what we're hearing.
Yeah, if you're here for the school district, there will be a specific
We have a
time that
public
you can
hearing.
come in for a
Yeah.
public hearing where you can come up. So those, no, so it will be a public hearing specifically for that.
The
So,
school district, yeah.
yeah, on the school district. Any other items? So we have the school district public hearing, and we're going to have one on the deer. If you're here for anything else, we recommend you come up at this time.
Hello, City Council members. I'm Greg Slade, 10324 Mountain Ridge Way. I just wanted to follow up quickly on following our last meeting where we voted yet again on the Ninja Park. I happened to come across a note that I'd written when I attended the Highland Park meeting on the 20th September 2021. I noted that Kim, you were there, Scott, you were there, and then Brittany, you swapped with Kim about halfway through the meeting. I made this particular note in there. There was a discussion, there was an idea of a small area with some skateboard type amenities that was discussed using the now free acre area on the west of the park, perhaps to be additional parking. Anything that would generate noise, I wrote down, e.g. a skateboard park, would be moved to the east side of the park away from being right by the neighborhood and houses. So I came across that after the last city council meeting. So that was a discussion we had in 2021. And, in hindsight, having thought back on this, the Ninja Park seems to have appeared sometime after this. It appeared in about 2022 and then disappeared again from the plans that any of us residents could see, as we discussed before. Now, again, the Ninja Park should not have been a surprise to any of us residents in that phase 2 when those plans reappeared. We never felt we had a proper opportunity to discuss that. And frankly, that was, like I say, it should not have been a surprise. There was then a rushed discussion with the residents when the new options were discussed, and option 2 was preferred by the residents, only for the city council to come out of nowhere during that discussion with a new option 3, which you then proceeded to vote to approve. So then again, in our last meeting, frankly, we had a discussion of moving the park to the center area now. And the reason, Scott, you admitted, you were not prepared. You had not had a chance to read the emails before that meeting. Obviously put together very quickly around that new option. Andy, you gave a new and rapidly produced reasons against the middle location for the park. There was no quality discussion, especially outside of the Rush Council meeting. And Kim, you eventually stated that moving the Ninja Park to the middle is just not a viable option. And then you voted. Well, not from where I was sitting. You can't say it was a viable option. There was no real discussion. Now, frankly, in review, stage 2 of the Mountain Ridge Park has been a haphazard from one jolt to another. You've now decided to proceed with another haphazard decision for the park, still an option 2, and to mitigate any issues later. But who knows how much that will end up costing the city versus moving the Ninja Park to the middle. Certainly, when you're spending around $600,000 on this new piece of the park, with the potential for then additional cost for mitigation, you'd like to believe that you'd be responsible. The responsible thing would be to understand the implications of what you're voting on. In business and in life, it is important to make data-driven decisions, not one haphazard decision after another. You have not taken the time to really gather proper data, and instead you have relied on feelings and opinions. Again, we ask that the city pause the Ninja Park and employ a professional park planner and conduct proper investigations in order to make correct data-driven decisions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Barb Lamb, and I'd like to address you again about Canal Boulevard. I'm tired of the lip service from the city council that we've gotten over the number of years. I have lived on that corner, and you guys and the previous council continuously say that you're going to do studies, that you're going to do something. I greatly, greatly appreciate the fact that we got the speed bumps. However, you put up those signs saying, give us your opinion. Of course, nobody's going to give you an opinion that they want those speed bumps. Why would they? They don't live there. They do not see the carnage that happens. They do not see the kids almost hit. They do not see the animals killed. They do not see people drag racing or coming down our road at 90 miles an hour. Are you going to do something to stop it? It is a problem, and it has been a problem for a long time. So why will you not take care of it? I am tired of this. I do not want to watch someone die. Do you understand that the trail is across the road? It is one of the busiest roads. People crossing on Canal Boulevard to the trail. Yet the sidewalk is ridiculous. The crosswalk is ridiculous. It's in a curve where you can't see anybody. You need to do something. I have seen great results from your speed tables. People slow down. People are courteous at the crosswalk. I watch. I live there. I see. I haven't seen anybody drag racing on Sundays. I haven't seen the sports cars going down our street on Sundays anymore. It's done something. It's made a difference. You need to permanently do something to make a difference. It doesn't matter what 85% of the people say. It matters to the people who live on this street, whose lives are in danger, whose property are in danger, whose kids are in danger. Do something before somebody else is killed, or somebody is killed, or something worse happens to somebody's home. You have no area of road within Highland, Utah, in that short of spans that goes absolutely nowhere. It's no longer a through road that you say it is. It's not the through road it was designed to be. It is not a through road. It is a wide, short, fast road that needs to be taken care of. Something needs to be done. Thank you.
Anyone else like to come up and address the council? Okay, seeing that, we will now close our unscheduled public appearances, and we'll bring back now to our consent items. We have 3 consent items. We have the first consent item is approval of the meeting minutes from June 4th, 2024. We have also an ordinance of officers of the city residential amendment, and then we also have an interim city engineer appointment, since we are losing our good city engineer. So is there any of these that we need to pull or anything that way?
Mayor, I'd like to pull 2B.
Anything else?
I move to adopt the consent agenda as amended.
You're proposing to approve number 2A and 2C, correct?
Yes, as amended, correct. Even though I second it.
That's a second. A second. Okay. Ken will give a second. So I have a motion by Doug and a second by Ken. Are we prepared to vote on them? That passes 5-0. Scott, I'll bring you to number 2B, which is the ordinance of the officer's residency amendment.
I appreciate the work the staff has done on kind of fixing this ordinance and looking into it. The only question I have, I do have a fair number of constituents that approach me and say, you know, no one in the Highland staff lives in Highland anymore. And I think to get, you know, exceptional staff and that, obviously we have to invite people from outside the city to come and apply and do the work. And we appreciate our staff that lives outside the city. We've got some great ones. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't allow this, certainly. But I do think that when we interview people, we should encourage them to live in Highland, not as a prerequisite for having their job, but suggest that that's a possibility, because I do have a lot of people that tell me, hey, no one that works in the city building lives in Highland. So there's kind of this feeling like we have the city run by people from outside the city all the time. So I don't know. I don't know what you can do about that. I don't know if you have that many applicants from Highland, but I just say in the application process, if you just say, hey, it'd be nice if you lived in the city, or invite them to come live here. I don't think that's really controversial.
So as we look at this amendment, what it was is it stated that if you were going to be the city administrator, I think also your city attorney, this was kind of, I think it was a requirement, am I thinking right, Rob, that they need to live within the city to be able to serve in that position?
Within 60 days after appointment, correct.
And so and the city engineer, so we were a little worried that if we hire someone, we give them 60 days, that, like you mentioned, Scott, none of them is our senior staff at this time live in Highland. It would be nice, but I think some of the listening to staff, and I think some of the concern is what the property value they've noticed here and where they could live in neighboring communities is what I think is keeping some of them from moving in this area. But that's up to them to, I guess, kind of thing. Is there other concerns or comments on this amendment? But Scott, I think we all would love to have it. I mean, I can name a couple of employees that live here in Highland, and we do appreciate them if they can. We'd love to have the employees that would come and engage, but it's also hard in today's economy. So.
Yeah, I think it just restricts our opportunity to get the right person in. It does limit how many would be able to apply if we were to say you have to live in Highland. I think we'd have to double our wages to our staff if we want to get very many in. It is an expensive place to live compared to, you can just go to Cedar Hills and get it for $20,000 cheaper.
Well, and you understand what I'm saying.
I do.
I'm not saying that has to be a prerequisite,
right.
But it'd be nice if we just said, hey, if you can find a way to live in Highland.
I mean, I think what you're maybe saying is if you're looking at an applicant and you also say, hey, they're 50-50 and one lives in Highland, that might be a favorable lift of a point.
Exactly right.
So.
Yeah. And I support that 100%, Scott.
With that, is there a motion for this?
I move that the City Council adopt and approve the proposed ordinance repealing appointed city officer residency requirements.
Is there a second? I have a motion by Doug. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, I have Kim that will second. Is there further discussion that needs to be had before we go to vote? If there's not, let's go ahead and go to vote. Okay, we're going to go ahead, Ron. We'll start with you with voice.
Yes.
Kim?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
And Brittany?
Yes.
That passes 5-0. We're now on to our first action item, which is the public hearing for the Alpine School District interlocal agreement. We will have a presentation by Councilmember Brittany Bills, and probably our attorney, Rob Patterson, will also chime in on this.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick overview about what we're talking about with this school district. I think the first thing to know is this presentation is just about the basic facts and what's happening, and then following that, it's your opportunity to tell us what you think. So decisions haven't been made. This is just a public input process. So that's the first thing I want to preface with. The second thing I would like to preface with is that none of this is any indictment of Alpine School District or the way that our kids are educated. It's just a public process to try to get some information from you and maybe to give you some information in return. So that's kind of what we're going to go over tonight. So the Central School District is the temporary name for this potential new school district in northern Utah County. So if voters were to approve this, if it were to be voted on to put on a ballot in November, then voters would vote on this. If it were to pass, then a future school board would decide the name and really make all decisions related to this school district. The city council's only role at this point is to hold public hearings and to decide if it's put on the ballot or not for voters to decide in November. So this would be coordinated through an interlocal agreement with Alpine, American Fork, Cedar Hills, Draper. There's a little part of Draper that feeds into Alpine School District, Highland, and Utah. And Lehigh. Some of you have probably heard about another interlocal agreement, and there is one out west for Eagle Mountain, Saratoga Springs, Fairfield, and Cedar Fort, and that is completely separate from what we are doing. And the voters in that part of the district will have an opportunity to vote on that proposed new school district as well in the west. So the cities within this potential new school district conducted a feasibility study to assess the financial impacts of a new district. We hired an outside firm to do this study. And they looked at enrollment and taxable value, the general fund, what capital projects would be needed, the debt service fund, and taxes as well. So those are some of the things they took into consideration. And of course, with anything like this, there are a lot of assumptions that have to be made in order to complete a study. So some of those were the financial or the final tax impact would depend on decisions of a potential future school board. Like I said, the city councils would not be a governing body of these school districts. There would be a school board that would be elected. The Central School District has a slightly higher taxable value per student compared to the existing Alpine School District. And of course, any future taxable values will be influenced by actual growth, future development, and property tax changes. Future property tax revenues, of course, can also be impacted by the establishment of redevelopment areas. So those are just some of the things that the firm took into account when they did this study. They really looked at two different scenarios to forecast the expenditures and revenue of the proposed Central School District. The first scenario used the percentage increase in student enrollment, and the second scenario used the percentage of facilities costs. Both of these came back with similar results, which is that the creation of a central school district is a viable option. And that's really what we wanted to know from this study, is whether or not this was a viable option. According to both of those scenarios, property owners could experience less of a future tax burden if they separated from the Alpine School District. And again, there will be lots of variables that come into that as far as decisions made by any future school board. So just a quick overview about what the process is. So on April 29th, the 6 cities voted unanimously to create this interlocal agreement. And now we are in the middle of a public comment period. So all of these cities are holding 2 public hearings each to allow for public comment so that we can hear what residents think about this option and study the feasibility study that can be found at the website that I will show you in the end. So this public comment period will go on until August 2nd, at which point those public comments period ends, the public hearings end, and then on August 6th, the city councils will decide whether to put the question on the ballot. So to be clear, the city councils are just deciding whether or not to put this on the ballot in front of residents. They are not voting on the actual creation of this school district. That will be done by voters in November during the general election. It's also important to remember that any future decisions regarding funding, programs, personnel, compensation, facilities, maintenance, all of those things would be decided by a future school board elected directly by the voters in those 6 central school district cities. So also important to note that for this central school district creation, only the voters in these 6 cities who would be directly impacted or part of this new district would be the ones who are voting. So none of the other cities would vote on this specifically. So just important to remember that those would all be decisions made by a future school board. So the next steps would be that city councils will vote on whether or not to place this on a ballot in front of residents. And then if this were to pass in November during that general election, voters would get to elect their new school board. And they would do that in November of 2025, so during the following election cycle. And then in January 2026, the new board members would take office. In February of 2026, the work would commence to initiate the actual split. And the new board would really start working in July of 2027. So as you can see, it's a long process. This is nothing that happens quickly, nothing that happens overnight. Lots of time to make decisions. So those are kind of the next steps. Just for your information, there is a website that has been set up at centralschooldistrict.org. There's lots of great information there as far as questions and answers. There's a place for you to submit questions if you have them, and a really good selection of kind of pros and cons. And you can also find the study at that website as well so that you can get your questions answered. You're also welcome to email the centralschooldistrict.org, and if you email that, you will get in contact with the city councils of all 6 of the cities. So we would love to hear your comments. Now, if you are not comfortable or prepared to make them tonight, we are happy to read them online as well. So, Aaron, I think that's all I have.
Hey, maybe before we begin, one reason why you probably see a council member doing this presentation is we asked Councilmember Brittany Bills a couple years back to follow the Alpine School District. She is a former teacher, and so we kind of asked Brittany to keep the council abreast. And so as this has kind of come about, with this, we thought the best person to do the presentation would be Councilmember Brittany Bills. So that's why you see Brittany doing this presentation, is this is her forte. So Scott.
Right, I just one comment and question. So I think one thing we don't emphasize is if the school district is broke up into 2 or 3, there would be a lot more school board representation. Because right at this particular time, our school board representative lives in American Fork. There's no one living in Alpine, Cedar Hills, or Highland that represents us on the school board. And if we divide up the school district, which the legislature is really wanting to happen, it would increase our representation. Is that not right?
Yeah, that's correct. If it were to break into 3 districts, you would basically have 3 different school boards that would be making those decisions. I think it's important to realize as well, so we have this interlocal agreement that's happening in the West that's being discussed, and then we have our central school district that's being debated and discussed. So if one of those interlocal agreements were to pass, then Alpine School District would basically cease to exist, and it would have to form a new district basically, because the composition would be different, right? You would have different representation. You would have different numbers of school board members in different areas. So if one of these agreements passes, then Alpine School District as it is has to be reorganized anyway. So, but one of these agreements passing does not mean the other one will automatically pass. They're 2 completely separate votes, and those cities in the South have chosen not to enter into an interlocal agreement, but by default, right, if the interlocal agreement in this central area did not pass, then by default, we would remain as we are. Or if ours did not pass and the one in the West did, then we would remain with those cities in the South. So this is really an opportunity to give voters a say in what they want it to look like.
And it'll be more of a localized. So if the West, which is Saratoga Springs, Eagle Mountain, Fairfield, and Cedar Fort, they will be voting if the city councils move it forward. Only that area would vote on if there's a West formed. The Central District, which is the Alpine, Cedar Hills, Highland, Lehigh and American Fork will
And
only
Draper,
be those
part of
residents, and part of Draper that is in Utah County, only those residents will be voting on the central, if the central district is to be formed. So it's not everyone in the district voting. I think you made that kind of clear, but I just want to make sure everyone understood. It's only those in the district that is being proposed that will be part of the vote. And there was a comment about the state legislators. The state legislators, what we understand, well, what the bill understood is there was confusion. The school district looked like they were putting forth a proposal to split into two ways. Then there was also communication by the maybe not to do anything. And then there was also a proposal to have a three-way split. And there was confusion with the vote, or we were concerned, and I think the legislators, there was going to be confusion on if both of those passed, how would that work? And so the legislators, from what my understanding they did with the new bill that was just passed in June, was saying, hey, let's take it back to where it was at before there was a bill passed just here in the last legislation, which gave the district an opportunity to put it on the ballot. So you have to understand, the cities have always had the opportunity to put it on. It was new to have the school district have it, because and we all have to go to the county. So when we do an interlocal, we have to go and register with the county stating that we'd like to move forward. But right now we have a public hearing process. The councils will be voting on August the 6th. Every council in the central district is going to be voting on August. Am I correct on that date? So that will be the date that the council will decide if they're going to vote to place it on the ballot that then would go forth to be voted on by the residents in November. Anything else you feel like?
So one other thing, Mayor, that I think is important, and we already heard it in a comment tonight, and it's one of the questions I think that we get the most often is, why can't everybody just stay together, and why can't that be an option? And from our perspective as Highland City, that is not an option that we have to vote on. The West has their own interlocal agreement that they will vote on and make a decision for them. And so the option for us to make a decision for them and say we want to all stay together, that's not an option that we have right now. They will make their decision about what they want to do, and we will make the decision about what we want to do. I've also heard comments about how the option for having the two district split is no longer on the table. And I think that's, in my view, that's not exactly correct, because if this interlocal is not passed by these cities in the central district, then by default it remains a two district configuration, right? If the West were to decide to leave Alpine School District and this central interlocal failed, then we would remain with those cities in the South. So while that's not an option on the ballot, it is the default that happens if this interlocal does not pass.
As we get prepared for public comment, once again, this centralschooldistrict.org, if you go there, you can make comments in favor, yes or no, and it is posted there, so it does. And as council members, I know that we've been getting emails showing the different comments there, and so that this is a site where you can put both perspectives on it. This is not just, hey, we're only advocating one aspect. It's both perspectives are on there about why it should happen one way or another. With that, council, I think we're prepared to go ahead and go to public hearing unless there's something.
Just one comment in terms of it's pretty well established, I believe, and this is my own opinion, that the West is going to approve this. Once that happens, the votes for the 6 remaining cities is, do we want 2 districts or 3? Do we want to be part of 9 cities or 10 cities with the 4 in the West being their own and we're just the remaining ones? If that's the case, you vote no. If you vote yes, then you're saying we want the central district, we want 3. So the option for 2 districts is certainly on the table, especially given the fact that I genuinely believe the West is going to vote in favor of splitting off. And once they do that, then where does that leave us is the question we wanted to put to the residents. If this was a vote for establishing this district and we were making that vote, I would abstain. That's not my call. It's the residents' call. And that's basically what we're doing. It's what Brittany has been working for 2 years to establish. And once the West has done what they did, then we are left with, okay, do we want 2 districts or do we want 3 districts?
I know we're just maybe for transparency, we mentioned this in the last public hearing, but this process didn't just all happen on April 29th. We started hearing early on that the West was looking at doing an interlocal agreement. And so, it was also being, reactive to what was going on as, if you want to say, the cities of the Central. I know that by March, we were talking with council members saying, hey, this appears that the West is starting to form an interlocal agreement. We need to be aware. And then as it got closer, the cities got together and discussed. There were some meetings, different meetings with the cities. And so this, if there's a city that, or someone that was kind of surprised, before the one we voted on the 29th of there in April, we'd actually brought up a comment about a week and a half before in council meeting that, hey, this is possibly going to be coming down the path. And so we were giving some signs out there that there's agreement starting to come about with the interlocal. Like I said, I knew about it in March. And so we were starting to try to figure out where's the best place for the central, if you want to say, Highland to sit. And we were communicating with all the neighboring cities, which by the way, I want to tell, we do have 2 council members here from Lehigh City. I appreciate them coming and being attentive to see what's kind of going on. So you do have some council members from other cities that are here. So appreciate and welcome them here tonight. But with that, we're going to go ahead and open up for public hearing. This will be the public hearing for the Alpine School District for us to give your comment if we should enter into an interlocal agreement. So at this time, if you'll please come up, state your name, and keep your comments to 3 minutes. If you hear someone else that makes a similar comment, we just try to save on some time. You're welcome to come say, hey, I support that comment that person said. So at this time, we'll go ahead and we'll open up for the public hearing. And we have Emrin.
My name is Emrin Schutz. I taught for Alpine School District for 7 years. I also taught for Murray School District and for Nebo School District. One point I wanted to make is that as we are looking at representation, there's also a new bill within the last couple of years that we can increase the number of school board representatives to 9 from 7. So that is another way that we could improve representation. I have taught for a large school district and a small school district, and there is a reason that I have spent most of my time in the large district, and it is because big ships float the best when the waters are rocky. I taught in Murray School District during the recession, and it was not a happy time. I was taking pay cuts every year, while Alpine was still pretty stable, and I ended up switching to Alpine for that reason. I also, from teaching computers specifically, have a pretty good understanding of how a lot of our software licenses work in the district. And there are a lot of areas like that where if we split at all, our costs will go nowhere but up. Now, I think there is a pretty good chance the West splits. And if they do, it honestly comes out, I think they're going to be a little having a rough time for a few years. It's going to be great for us. We're going to end up with very moderate student growth, which is perfect. You always want a little new student growth because new student growth comes with new student money. We're going to have a strong tax base. We're going to have, I think it's about 40,000 students, which is about half of what we are now. It's perfect for us. If we split again, making this central district, our costs have nowhere to go but sky high. We have the infrastructure in Alpine District now to split 2 ways with minimal buildings needed. We have 2 bus depots, 2 alternative high schools, things like that. We would also end up with the district building in American Fork. If we have to go 3 ways, that requires a lot more building that often isn't planned into the assessments because it's messy. But often when these firms look at things, they can't factor that in. But each of those buildings, a bus depot is not cheap. Rebuying all the tools to fix the buses is not cheap. Licenses, a lot of those will be straight up double costs or will be significantly more than what they are now. If we stick with everybody on the east side now, let the West vote on their split, it's a beautiful situation for us where we can still have good special ed programs, good programs for our students who aren't typical fit-in-the-box students. It's the best of both worlds for us. And if we split again, it will not be. It will hurt our kids.
Hi, I'm Kevin Tams. Excited to talk to you about this. What I want you to know is we support, love our teachers, everybody that does things for us in the school district. They're awesome. I wish we could do more. I'm eager to do the right thing here. I think you've put us in a good position. Representation has been a problem. Right now, I know American Fork does well under our current council represented at the school district, but we don't. We do have older facilities, which is kind of odd. Lone Peak has the oldest gym. We just barely got the stadium redone. We've got older things in the district, but I'm excited about it. But I do want you to know that it's going to cost us money, and I plan on it. I'm okay with it. It's a good investment in the future. There are hidden expenses. When you split something from big to small, it always costs more. So again, excited about it. I think it's a good thing to do. We're positioned wisely, but just be prepared for the tax increase that's going to come, because it will. I don't know how big, but it will. So thank you.
Do we need to introduce ourselves or anything? Yeah, okay. My name's Amber Bonner. I live in Cedar Hills. But I wanted to come tonight because I'm in kind of a unique position. And that is that 2 years ago, I was our school board rep for this whole area. And when I was on the board in 2021, we did a lot of studying about a school board split and about what could happen and what that would look like. And so I have a lot of information from that. And if there's ever questions or, you have things you'd like to know, please reach out. I know a bunch of you have my cell phone number. Just reach out and I'm happy to talk. One of the things we had decided in that study was that there were a lot of building needs in the district. And so we wanted to put a bond on the ballot and pass a bond and get some of those taken care of before we moved on to the next next items in looking at splitting the district. As you know, we ran a bond in 2022 and that bond failed. That bond passed in the West, where we have significant school growth needs, and failed in the East, where we have maybe different types of needs. My concern about that, and with what we're seeing in board votes with the school board right now, is we're seeing significant division between what different areas in the district want, what their needs are, what their concerns are, what their priorities are. And because of that, when I got elected to the board, I was completely opposed to any type of split. But during my time on the board and since, I actually am in favor of splitting, and I prefer the three-way split. I think in our area, we are better off to stay with Lehigh, and this actually configuration of the interlocals is my favorite because I think it puts our students in a good position to be with other students that have the same needs and other schools that have the same needs. I think it's hard to talk about splitting because I think Alpine's an amazing district. We have wonderful people, wonderful staff, wonderful teachers, and I don't want any of them to feel that they're not valued, and that's why we feel we need to split. But I think we're seeing significant division on the board right now. When we're talking about what the needs are, we're seeing significant division in our citizens as to what the needs are and what they're willing to pay for. If Eagle Mountain doesn't want to pay for schools in Orem, and if Orem doesn't want to pay for schools in Lehigh, you can't stay together because kids have needs and those needs have to be met. I think it's hard, but I think one thing we really have to remember, and one thing that I've tried to really remind people of, is even if a split was to pass in November, we have 3 years really to figure all the things out, to figure out what teacher salaries would be, what their benefits would be. Teachers would know all of that before they're in a new district. And so I think that's something that would be very helpful for people as they're considering what they want to do and what they think is the right decision here. So I just want to tell you thank you for looking at it, for considering what our area needs, and for being willing to do that, because I know it's a big thing and you're probably getting a lot of emails. I'm getting stopped at the store by everyone you know, like I am. So thanks.
Please come up to the mic so we just can.
Our area is would be more like the Canyons district, I think. Is that correct?
Are you asking number-wise?
Could you state your name, please?
No, just as far as how we would handle how things would
We
look
need
for
your
us.
name, please.
Yeah, you'll
Sorry.
please state
Oh,
your name
Paula
again.
Forbes, thank you. If we were in the, so my question is, what has happened with Canyons? Do you know what happened with their taxes? Do you know what happened? I think a lot of the facilities were already in Canyons, but do you know?
How about
Have you looked
give
at
your
that?
comment, and then at the end, if there's any council want to address that, they can do that. Is that okay? Good. Anyone else would like to come up and address the council on the interlocal agreement?
My name is Anne-Marie Gordon, and I had the unique opportunity of being the PTA president at Westfield Elementary this past year. And even though Westfield is located in Alpine, I think about half our students live in Highland. So we got a lot of kids from Highland, which was great. And, you know, I thought when I first started, it would all be parties and fun, and that was the only thing I was going to do. But boy, there were a lot of problems we had to deal with the district because we were just really big. And so we couldn't do all sorts of things because we weren't very creative. We were too large to do the things we really needed to do because, you know, risk management was involved and all sorts of other things. And then, you know, week before Christmas, they told us our ALL program was going to be closed. And there really wasn't a lot of justification for that to happen. We had to put together the biggest fight of our lives to go and save that program. And we knew we only were saving it for a little while. They made it pretty clear that this wasn't really going to stick around. We know you're going to be gone soon enough. And then we'll cut it then. And it was just something that made it clear that representation was really important. I want you to think about, as a city council member, how much time you spend talking to residents about this or that. My husband was a city council member in Alpine, and I know he spent a lot of time talking to people about all sorts of things. Right now, there are 71 city council members that represent the area of Alpine School District. If we split into 3, we would have 21. Those would still be pretty large districts, pretty large areas. And I want you to also remember, we're not moving to be a small district. We're just going from number 1 to like number 5. It's not a huge jump. There's 42 districts in the state of Utah. We would not be a small district. We would be a large district. And for those of, you know, we talk a lot about the bond and the bond failing and all of that. I don't think it failed because we don't value education here. I think that's completely untrue. We do. We value education, but we want our tax dollars to be spent locally. I'm sure anytime you guys have a tax increase, you hear from everyone, right? It's something we really want our tax dollars to be carefully addressed locally. If we had more local control, we would see better results. And I think the last thing is really anything can be solved with contracts and creativity. We do all of the things we're doing today. We can still do those things. We can still serve all of the students we're serving in many of the same ways. These districts can work together. They can get past that. These boards can be collaborative, and they can work together just like all of the cities are doing today. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Glenn Judd. I'm from Alpine, and I'm going to be real quick.
Can you please state your name just so we have
Glenn Judd, Alpine. I was in that fight with Anne Marie to save ALL. The district made it very clear they wanted to shut down ALL at Cedar Ridge and Cedar Hills and Westfield, leaving only Highland. So all those students would be crushed into Highland Elementary. And while they did back off, I'm just going to say that it is quite clear if the district does not split, we will lose ALL at both those schools. Highland will be the only one remaining. And I think that is a result of the representation. It follows the voters. There are a lot of voters down in Orem, and there are more students up here. So the representation per student is lower here. And so I feel that a split would be beneficial to give more voice to the students here. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else before we close public hearing? Okay, at this time, we're going ahead and we will close the public hearing, bring it back. Council, there was a couple of questions. I think there was one about the Canyon Jordan split. Would anyone like to try to address that question? I mean, my understanding about the Jordan Canyon split, it was not as amicable. However, the state legislators have after they saw that, they've went and put in some code and some things to be able to help through if there is a district split, to be able to help things that are going to be equally done. There's comments about, this is what we're understanding, that I'm not advocating that we have to, I'm just saying this is information. If we happen to have the Alpine School District building, the office buildings, we have to compensate. We have a study that's done by LRB. I'd recommend that you go to centralschooldistrict.org, and if you do the studies there, in that study, they gave a percentage of what they believed that the Central would have to take on financially or compensate to the other behalf of the other districts. My understanding also, if we happen to have an area that generates more property tax for schools, that will be evenly divided a little bit. The district, so the question about how did Canyons Jordan, that was not in place. So the state legislatures have come in to try to be, hey, how do we make these splits be amicable so there's not one winner versus another. When I brought up about the cities getting together, one thing that the cities were really looking at is trying to have 4 high schools per district. And we projected what we believed the West would have. We believe they'll end up with 4. If the Central's formed, there'd be 4. And if the South is formed, with that, they would have 4. There was a comment I also believe about a really small district in one city being Murray. Emron brought that up. That we have heard that was problematic. But my understanding is if the Central District does split, we'll end up as about 32 to 35,000 students. Am I understanding that one right, Brittany?
Yes.
Okay. Anything else before we leave this topic?
I'll have just a couple more things. And Amber, correct me if this is wrong, but I believe that one school board member currently represents more people than our state representative does, correct? So that's just an interesting fact. I'll just echo what the mayor said, that there has been legislation since the Jordan Canyon split. And I think maybe even more importantly than the legislation is just a lot of lessons learned and a lot of people who are really smart, I think, who are willing to assist if this were to pass. I think the last thing just to say that we should have confidence in is, look, I think everybody having these discussions cares about kids. And that's the focus of all of these decisions, I think, and should be the focus of our discussions. I know as a city council, this is zero about power and control. I'm not running for school. Anybody here want to run for school board? No. That's not what this is about. It's about putting something on the ballot to give our residents a choice, to let them do the research. I encourage everybody to read the study that is on the Central District website. Read the study that's on the school district website as well, where this is one of the options. This configuration is one of the options that they also said was a viable option. So we should all do our research, have good conversations, and realize at the end of the day, regardless of what we think about this, I think we all care about kids and education and teachers, and that makes me feel more comfortable about the whole thing.
There was a couple of comments I've noticed on social media about are the cities having a disagreement? Is Orem having a disagreement with Highland or Lehigh? We did not recognize that there were city issues there, meaning that it was not personalities. I think they were looking at how best to serve the student as we were looking at some things. And so we appreciate those who've made comments tonight. We're now going to move on to our next public hearing, which is the public hearing on the Urban Deer Program. We are going to have a presentation. Is it going to be you, Aaron, that's going to do the Urban
I'm
Deer?
filling in, yes.
Okay. Stephanie Cottle, who's down on here, is out of town. So.
Okay. Mayor and council, this item is coming back to you. We discussed it as a communication item last meeting, and ultimately it's coming back to you for your approval. We felt like we got the indication from council last time you were interested in potentially moving forward with this. So just a little bit of background. The DEER program, can you go back to the slide? Sorry. The DEER program has been running since 2013, and originally there were quite a number of deer being harvested per year. Now we're down to around 18 per year the last few years. And what we really are trying to do, the goal of the program was to eliminate some of the issues that are caused by our resident deer. And so that's not the deer that come down from the mountains during the winter to find some shelter. It's the deer who live in our city year round. So the goal, again, was to decrease the number of deer car collisions that we see with the major roads running through our city, as well as kind of just provide a service to residents who see damage to their landscaping because of the deer. So there's a graph that kind of shows the number of deer that we've harvested over the years per year. And then the next graph actually talks, we tried to look to see, are we actually being effective in eliminating the number of deer that are being hit? And unfortunately, there is not a clear trend line that it has actually helped. There seems to be some variability there that I can't tell you why, but there's no clear correlation there. However, we have received thanks from people who do appreciate that we can help in some regards in terms of the landscape. Next slide, please. And so overall, since 2013, when the program was started, we've used a private contractor to maintain this program. He's no longer able to do that service for our city. So Public Works has the ability to continue this program on a complaint-only basis. And so ultimately, if we want to continue this program, it's authorized by DWR. We have to enter into this core agreement, is what they call it. So the process would be, a resident would call us and let us know they had an issue. They would have to sign a waiver because we would ultimately be harvesting the deer on their property through a trap and euthanization method. There are costs to the program. We're estimating about $8,000 per year, a little bit more than what we currently spend because we're going to have some upfront costs that we'll have to take on to make that happen. And it will run in the fall season before the migratory deer come down. So ultimately, council, it's you need to hold a public hearing and then make a decision whether you would like city staff to continue with this program.
So, do you want us to hold off any comments?
Yeah, why don't we have our public hearing, then we can maybe get some input.
Okay.
So at this time, we'd like to go ahead and open our public hearing on item number 3B, which is the Urban Deer Program in Highland. Is there anyone who'd like to come up and address the council? Okay, seeing none, we'll now bring this back. We'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the council. Scott, I think you had...
I appreciate the presentation by Aaron. Let me just kind of explain where this came about. And actually, I think we were one of the first city programs in the state of Utah to develop a program like this, and we've had several other cities kind of come on board because of this. So as the population has grown on the Wasatch Front, and during the years of drought, and the fact that they've changed when I grew up in Pleasant Grove, we took time off every school fall year for the deer hunt. And over time, it's become more regulated and different things. One of the concerns were, back 12, 13 years ago when we set up this program, is that our parks were full of deer, especially the Highland Glen Park. And I think, if I remember correctly, they took about 85 deer out of that park. The problem is those of us in the city who like to garden basically have our yards destroyed by the deer. Now, the goal was never to eliminate the deer in the city. The goal was to kind of cull the herd, and the feeling was the remaining deer would be healthier and there wouldn't be so much competition. So I can give you an example. We had a couple bucks have a battle in my backyard and chased my wife out of the yard years ago. And even now, with the wall around the east-west corridor and different things, which I thought would cut down the deer population, I don't have to aerate my lawn because there's so many deer dancing on it all the time. And so it's either, we're a deer refuge or the people can enjoy their yards. And that's why I voted for this before. I support it again. We have several deer in our property. And yes, I remember one time there was a deer that was hit on the Alpine Highway, and someone who was being kind of funny because it laid there for like days or weeks till the Department of Wildlife Services came and removed it, and they put a sign up saying venison, $2.49 a pound. But it stayed there for a long time and smelled things up. Pardon? That's a true story. That is a true story. Okay. We also know that back in the day there was a deer, one of our fire trucks, one of the pickup trucks that was involved hit a deer, cost I think the city $6,000. So, you know, there's a lot of, you know, I'm on the animal board, I love animals and all that, but I think at the same time, you have to find this balance. And even with all this, I see deer all through my neighborhood, and it's a problem. So if you come home at night, you have to be careful not to hit one of them. So I support this. I think it plays a good role. We haven't eliminated the deer herd in the city. We've just culled it down so it's more attainable.
Council, further discussion or a motion?
We've
already
had
a
it.
public hearing.
You missed it. It was a blink.
No one came up, so.
I'll make a motion unless there's a lot of discussion. Okay. I move that the Highland City Council approve the continuation of the Urban Deer Program for the City of Highland and authorize the city recorder to submit the certificate of registration with the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources and direct the city administrator to implement the program through the City Public Works Department per the parameters detailed in the staff report and the Urban Deer Program Plan. It's a mouthful.
I'll second that.
Okay, I have a motion by Scott, second by Ron. Okay, if there's no other discussion, let's go ahead and vote. Okay, that passes 5-0. We'll now move on to number 3C, which is an actual item, which is the Canal Boulevard speed tables. Andy Spencer will give us a presentation.
Mayor and Council, as directed by the council, the city purchased temporary speed tables, and these speed tables were intended to be located all over the city, right? And so as different traffic calming requests came in, oftentimes the request is for a speed table. And so these speed tables were purchased. They are relocatable. They're temporary. We do have to actually, to get them to hold into place, we actually have to screw them down to the pavement. And so what you don't see is that in those pictures, you'll see that each of the little pieces is about, I think they're about 2 feet wide by about 4 feet long. Each of those pieces has a couple of screws in them that are actually screwed to the pavement. And so, you know, it's not a quick thing to move them, a quick thing to install them, but it is, they are certainly are movable. And in our climate, you know, we had intended that these would be things that we put up in the summertime, you know, spring, summer, fall, non-snowplow time to measure their effectiveness and measure the impacts on the neighborhoods and allow us to make good long-term decisions for those permanent improvements we put in. So the temporary speed tables were first placed in the section of Canal Boulevard that's between Alpine Highway and 6000 West. The map that's on the screen shows the 2 locations that were chosen. Those locations were largely chosen because they were the straightaways that were away from other intersection conflicts, that we could place them, that weren't on the curve, and didn't impact the intersections. So those speed tables, if we go to the next slide, were placed in April and May of this year. Public input was solicited via a survey. The little sign shows what was placed there on the signs, soliciting feedback from the residents. There was over 1,800 responses, and approximately 85% of those responded were against keeping the, it's actually supposed to say signs behind there. I think the sign covered it up. But there was notable speed reduction out of them. So let's go to the survey and talk a little bit about the survey. So we did a 5-question survey, trying to keep the survey fairly brief to keep somebody finishing the survey. And you'll note tonight that we see a lot of Brooklyn's good work, because she's the one that put together the survey and compiled the results for us. So the first thing we want to know is, are those that are responding, do they live in Highland? Are we getting the feedback from actual Highland residents? You know, not all those that drive on the road are from Highland. Just a little under 92% of those that responded were from Highland. Those that responded indicated fairly close to the same percentage. A little lower percentage lived fairly near. They considered themselves living near the speed bumps. Now, obviously, near is a kind of a somewhat ambiguous term. We all have a different definition of near, but the attempt was to say, okay, do you live in Highland? And do you live close to this area? Do you frequent this area often? That was what we were trying to drive at there. And then we asked them to rate their experience, with 1 being poor and 5 being high. And you can see it's, distribution across all the steps, but the largest grouping, about 75% of the people rated their experience as poor. On the next slide, we'll look at the rest of the other 2 questions we asked them. One, would you like them to remain permanently? And attempting to address those, because oft everybody wants traffic control on their street, but not many people want traffic control on other people's streets. So we're trying to attempt to address the fact of, but what if it was your street or your neighborhood? Would you want them on there? And so in the 5th question, one back. In the 5th question, we asked them, would you like similar speed bumps on your roads or the roads you frequently travel? And again, the responses were generally no, somewhere around that 85% level for no. So let's talk a little bit about the speed reductions. So, and the reason that I put up the little graphic here is where we measured the speed post-installation. We waited to measure the speed until the summer months because we wanted things to quote-unquote settle down on the road, and we wanted the speed tables to become kind of the norm, and we wanted things to resume to a normal driving pattern so we could really see the effect once, because if you measure them in the first few days, they're new, people are slowing down. We wanted to see what happens when people are driving their quote-unquote normal patterns once things resume to normal. In general, they were effective. What we did is we counted just before you go into the curve on the right side of the paper, and we had to refer to locations. So the east side's counts were referred to those that are near 5800 West. The west side counts refer to those that are by Crimson Court, just trying to reflect the 2 locations we counted. But we counted just before you go into the curve from each side, trying to get just far enough from the speed table that people were again resuming to their normal speeds, or if you're looking from the other direction, that they were coming around the curves at their normal speeds. They had gone over the speed table, they'd returned to whatever speed they were going to return to, and what was the effect? Because certainly at the speed tables, I think that most would concede that for the most part, people slowed down to 15 miles an hour. One thing with these temporaries is where they are built out of rubber, they do have like a little bit of a 1-inch lip, because I think it would be really difficult to build a temporary speed bump out of rubber that was perfectly smooth. So that it was, it is a little bit more of a jar than maybe some of those that are built with concrete and are built with a little more smooth transition. But for the most part, what I saw and observed when they're actually going over them, most cars were going, somewhere around the 15 mile an hour, maybe 20 mile an hour range. But the question always with the speed tables is, what do people return to, after they go over the speed tables? Because the claim always is, and what's claimed is that, well, once they go over the speed table, they just speed right back up to where they were going to, right? And so that was what we were really trying to drive at is okay, between the speed tables, what happens? Do people return to their speeds? We saw a speed reduction in all of our directions. The largest was about 4 miles an hour. The lowest, I think, was, there might have been one that was 1 mile an hour, but on average, we saw a 2 to 4 mile an hour reduction in what people return to in between the speed tables. Perhaps the greatest benefit, although I'm not discounting the 4 mile an hour reduction, the greatest benefit was that they really discouraged people from going really fast. And we're classifying really fast as over 10 miles an hour greater than the speed limit. So those that were going at a more excessive speed, that was a fairly significant reduction in that category, and that was very interesting. Actually, does kind of make sense that you know, maybe those that were driving a little faster were like, you know, no reason to really lay into it. I'm going to have to stop again and go over these. And you know, often with any type of speed mitigation device, we find that one on its own isn't nearly as effective as multiples, right? Which is why we put both speed tables in this section. And certainly we could have put more, but we thought, well, let's start with 2 and temporary and see how we do. And so that was actually quite encouraging that they did take discourage those more extreme speeders. So if we go to the next slide. You'll note in your staff report that the staff has recommended, based on you know, that the collector roads serve the entire population. So, and your entire city, for the most part, drives on your collector roads. Not everybody drives on every collector road, but most people who live in the city will drive on most of the collector roads because for one reason or another, whether they're going to visit friends, family, you know, various engagements around the town, the roads that you take to get somewhere are your collector roads. So your collector roads serve your entire population. They also are your emergency services routes. And so because of that combination, the fact that this is a collector road and it does serve the entire population, and the fact that you know, eliminating the bump makes it smoother on those in the ambulances, and you know, given the feedback of the city as a whole that, you know, they really didn't like them. You know, certainly some liked them. There was 15% that very much liked them. There's 85% that didn't like them. We're suggesting not that we can walk away from the corridor entirely, but that we look at, can we be equally as effective in speed reduction with some additional treatments such as the bulb-out islands. But we're not suggesting that we ought to just try one. We're saying, okay, let's come back in this corridor and let's put 3 or 4 of these bulb-out islands. We could create the islands with either the delineators like is shown in the left photo, or we could create them with using temporary curbs, very similar to our temporary speed tables, and create a series of bulb outs or islands or constrictions and see if we can achieve similar you know, speed reductions without the negative public feedback. You know, can we find the quote-unquote sweet spot with those? That's not to say that certainly the council can't revisit the idea of placing speed tables on it. If you put the temporary islands and delineators and, you know, come up with, you know, that just didn't work, didn't achieve the results, you can certainly come back to the speed tables. But based on the fact that it's a collector road, based on the fact that the public in general did not like them, we're saying, you know, let's look at another solution on this corridor. And again, suggesting that we ought to do it temporary to see its effect, and then come back and make good decisions, whatever those good decisions are. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. And I do want to note that in your motion, you've got one motion that suggests that you ought to remove them and investigate these islands. You've got one motion that says, let's leave them up and let's see what happens once school gets in. I mean, that's why the motion is to September. Let's see what happens when school's in, because right now we don't have in the middle of summer a full slice of our normal population. 9 months of the year, you've got kids going to high school. And right now we measured it in the summertime when the kids aren't going to high school. So there is some wisdom in saying, let's wait and let's see what they do and measure the speeds in September, right? And then the last one is to direct staff to, you know, at the right time, remove the temporary islands and then get some put together and get them bid to put in the permanents. It's unlikely at this point that you'd get them put in this year. You'd probably keep the speed tables in place until fall, and then pull them out, leave them out for the winter, and come back and put new, you know, the new permanent ones in the spring. You know, if you choose to go that way. So those are the 3 options that the staff suggested. But from staff side, the recommendation is let's try something else and see if we can get similar results and a little more positive public feedback.
Are there
Councilman Campbell.
speed table ratings in terms of miles per hour? I heard 15 miles an hour, 30-mile-an-hour tables. Is there such a thing? I mean, is this a 15-mile-an-hour table, but there's others that are less obtrusive and maybe 30-mile-an-hour tables?
Most of the tables are designed to slow you down to 20, ish, around 20. There are certainly mild versions and abrupt versions. If you want to go over the 5-mile-an-hour version, you go on the ones behind the high school, right? Yeah. Those are extremely abrupt. There are others that are in the general area that are a little more mild and that you can go over at 20 miles an hour and feel very comfortable, and some might go over even as high as 30 and feel comfortable. But the general target range for them is around 20 miles an hour. But oftentimes, that variability, while it does come through the design, sometimes comes through the construction too. If you go to Cedar Hills has a number of them, and I suspect, although I don't know, that they gave the contractor the exact same detail to build the speed tables. And you can go on some in Cedar Hills, and they're, 5-mile-an-hour speed tables. They're pretty close to the ones behind the high school. And then you go on some of Cedar Hills, and they're much more mild, and they're 20-mile-an-hour to 25-mile-an-hour speed tables. And so a little bit how careful the contractor was that built them. But certainly, if the slope approaching them is a little milder and the total height is a little milder, then you're going to be able to go a little more comfortable speeds over them.
I went out looking a little bit, and the highest design speed that I came across was a 30-mile-an-hour, and that's largely accomplished by a longer table across the top.
Hey, Addie. That's my daughter's name. Andy. She's always in trouble. Andy, so we have the traffic calming toolbox, and I know that people can apply, and if they're having traffic issues, that they can apply and basically say, hey, how am I on that priority list? Am I high enough priority that I can have some traffic calming measures taken in my area also? And I know that we bought these to not just be permanent, but to be able to be used in other areas as well. Is there anyone else in that waiting queue wanting these?
Probably those that have specifically requested tables. We're actually going to talk about, later tonight, kind of some of the those that are in the queue. Those that come to mind that have specifically requested tables is the neighborhoods, and we talked about it once very briefly, but there's kind of a cut-through maneuver, if you will, if you come down Beacon Hills Drive to cut over to Westfield to skip the intersection right at 11800. And so that neighborhood has requested speed tables. West of this location, those on Canal have also requested speed tables. Out of memory, and I'm not looking at that list, those are the two that come to mind that have requested speed tables specifically. And certainly we need to mention Park Drive, that the speed tables were discussed there. So really those three locations. Sorry, I need to...
Andy, as you bring up, I think one thing we hear a lot of from residents is about traffic speed as we have had growth or different things happen. As we look here at Canal Boulevard, one of the concerns I have noticed as we put the speed tables in, and I personally do it, where I take Canal, it's now moves some traffic to other roads, which is causing, so we the council, when some will say, hey, we haven't been listening, well, we brought about a traffic calming toolbox, putting out speed, the speed bumps here to see what the thing is. This is the council listing. However, I think we have to also be aware, and so my question for the council is this the correct location for these type of speed, because I look at, so my question, Andy, what roads in Highland, we talk about collector roads. As we look at classification, those that are going to go from the west to east or east to west, what roads are classified as collectors, and what has the city done to try to develop collectors so we're not getting the traffic even in certain areas?
So to answer the question I believe you're looking at, typically on a collector, and if we look at our roads, let's just step back from, so we have arterial roads, And in Highland, the arterial roads are the UDOT roads, basically. And those are basically arterials. Highland is short of Highland Boulevard and a little bit of 4800 West, which we've talked about both recently. Highland doesn't have a whole lot of roads that would fall in the category of arterial. So then we're looking at collector roads. And between your collector roads and your minor collector roads, right, because you've got arterials, major collectors, minor collectors, neighborhood collectors, and then local roads. So typically the spacing that you want on a collector, be that major or minor collector, is about a third to a half of a mile. So you want those running north, south, east, west through your community every third to half a mile. So just for reference, our half mile reference is 6,000 to 6,400. There's a half mile, right? So every 8 blocks in a mile. So in Highland, you've got 10,400, you've got Canal. I know that 9,600 isn't, it's been a long discussion, and it is a minor collector on our current plan, but it goes somewhere, right? So it functions like a minor collector. You don't have anything between SR 92 and 10,400 North. That's a little bit longer because that's about 6 blocks, right? So that's about 3/4 of a mile. And then you have SR 92, and then you have 11,200. And that's in your east-west directions. Those are really your collectors, that run through Highland between Alpine Highway and SR 90 or North County Boulevard. You really just have Canal, the portion or the east-west connector, and then you have SR 92, and then you have 11,200. So you don't have as many east of Alpine Highway, if you will. Certainly in Highland, you've really, in an east-west direction, you've got 4 north-south direction.
Is Canal a minor or major in our transportation plan?
It's a major.
So out of all those,
collector.
That's fine.
It's a collector.
A major collector.
A major collector.
Yeah, and I have some.
At least on the 2008
Yeah.
plan. And I'm sorry, Rob's got it up, so I'm cheating and looking at his computer. That's not why I'm looking at all of you, so that
Scott has some questions. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah. So I think we're going to address that in the changes in the general plan. So first of all, Andy, I think this is your last city council. Is that right?
It is, yes.
And I want to express my heartfelt is what I'm trying to say, thanks for your service over the last 3-4 years.
Thank you.
And I think you've listened to the people, you've walked into neighborhoods and helped solve a lot of problems. We've certainly seen a lot of great things that have happened in the city that you've been involved with, and I appreciate it. There's a street not too far from where I live that after 25 years, you orchestrated some repavement. And if you're going to be here longer, you'd probably have a statue in your name there because they're so happy. And it was so well done. I don't know how many people have stopped me and said, hey, they did it in a week. It was wonderful. Okay. And so you've done some good things. And I appreciate what you did. So we talk about Canal Boulevard, but the busy part of Canal Boulevard is between Alpine Highway and North County. I live just north of where that is. I know the impact it's made on my home and everything because it's a busy road. In the 2017 UDOT study, they thought there'd be 6,000 to 8,000 cars a day there. I think we're edging up close to 6,000 a day because it's pretty busy. But I really appreciate we did a seal coat on that part of Canal Boulevard, and you relined it, and you listened to us because you left the bike lanes in, and in areas where it was appropriate, you narrowed the median strip so it's no longer a passing lane, which was a problem. And then we have the turn signals at Willowbank, or the turn lanes at Willowbank and Featherstone, which makes it a lot safer. And people are really appreciative of that. So thanks for listening. I think you've kind of solved the problem into the business district with the curb there. So you've done some great things for the city.
Thank you.
So talking about these speed tables, I just want to make a couple comments. I think the fact that 85% of people hate them means that they're highly successful. And the reason I think that is because we were addressing some concerns of people who lived along Canal Boulevard going west of the Alpine Highway who were concerned about high speeders. I'm not sure what the answer is. We discussed this for a year and a half. It bothers me just a little bit that we immediately started doing a survey. Do you like it? Well, of course, if you have to slow down, you don't like anything. And I think what we were trying to address is some of the issues that we hear. Because since I've been the council the last 2 or 3 years, we've had neighborhood after neighborhood complain about speeding. And so I've never understood why it's not okay for people to slow down a little bit in a residential area. And so one of my concerns is I was curious why we put 2 speed tables on that section of Canal Boulevard when we had several residents from west of 6000 West who came and complained repeatedly. I don't know, I think you had a really good engineering reason why you did that, but it seems like it would have made sense to have one on both sides of 6000 West some distance, because we had so many complaints west of 6000 West, and yet we have 2 speed tables on this one kind of open section. And so I'm just thinking we probably haven't spent enough time or talked about placement or really let things kind of settle. So I drive to Pleasant Grove quite a bit, going east on the east-west corridor through Cedar Hills, which is just a little bit of a joke the farther east you go because it goes down to 1 lane. But I drive over the 2 speed tables by Deerfield Elementary. I know they're there. They use one of them as a crosswalk. They have their big city park. They have an elementary school there. I don't mind driving slower because I think it protects the people that use that park and also the elementary school people. So sometimes I think we need to take that into account. Yes, people have to drive a little slower. I'm not sure as Americans why we're always so anxious to drive just as fast as we can. I had an email from a resident that wanted to raise the whole speed limit on Canal Boulevard to 45. Well, the problem is you get to 45, people then drive 50, or they drive 55, and it's just human nature. So the speed limit's 30 now, probably lower than it needs to be, but people drive 35 anyway because they know they won't be picked up. And then 40. So the higher your speed limits go, if you follow this 85% rule, people drive faster and faster because it's human nature. And I'm guilty of it too. I got tired of people passing me because I was driving the speed limit. And they would pass illegally, but never, get ticketed or that because the police weren't there to do that. But I guess my opinion is this. I'm curious why we picked to put 2 speed tables in that section, why we didn't put one on the west side of 6000 West, why we can't let this work for a while, because we talked for a year and a half trying to resolve this issue, and then in a week survey, we're going to rip them out. And I just have kind of a hard time with that. I think we just need to do more study on it, and that's just my opinion.
Sure. I'll be happy to comment 2 items. Number one, thank you for the comments on Canal Boulevard. If you do happen to see a big white smear on it, somebody dropped drywall mud out of their car all over the brand new pavement today. And the roads crew was trying to get it off. So if you happen to see a big white smear over there by the BYU golf facility, we apologize. It does happen on the roads, and it was looking so nice and pretty.
It was pretty.
And so there's number one.
All 10 minutes.
Number 2, relative to why we put them in this area, it was an attempt to truly capture what we could do with them. Because as I indicated a little earlier, oftentimes we find with any type of speed reduction device, if you just put one, say in the case of a speed table, you just put one, pick your east side, your west side, people slow down for that, and then resume speed, right? And so we were trying to actually effectively control the speed on a given segment. Not that, you can't then take these 2 and move them west of there to west of 6000 West, but we felt like, we'd get a truer representation of what speed tables could do on this corridor if you put them in tandem, because if you were to come and decide to put permanent speed tables on this section, you might even put 3 in all truth on this section just to truly control the speeds on the section and not have people go over the one speed table, speed up, and go about their business, right? And so it was an attempt to be effective in our study and truly represent what they can do. And where we only had 2, we just put the 2 in this area, knowing that we'd likely pick them up and move them to another area next. So hopefully that addresses.
Well, that's helpful because I've wondered about that. I just thought it seems like we had a lot of comments from the other side.
Other council members on input, and then you'll make a motion if you're.
Yeah, I have some questions here. and actually some comments and a question. My concern is Canal Boulevard was designed as a major collector for a reason. And if we do things, 10-400, the speed limit's 35. Canal's 30. We're driving people from Canal to more likely take 10-400 that has cars backing out from their driveways all along 10-400.
Yeah,
it's not a major collector the way Canal is. It's a minor connector. And as a minor collector, it has cars that back up into the road to leave their homes. It seems unconscionable to me that we would make decisions here that would move traffic knowingly by reducing the speed limit, by putting in speed bumps, that would move people over to another road that is less safe. That just seems wrong to me. Having said that, I don't have enough data to make a decision tonight, quite honestly. I thought I did until I heard some comments. I'd like to know how many accidents were there. And you made a comment that said it reduced how many people were speeding. Do we know an actual number on that? Do we have actual data?
Yeah, we do have the data between the ones that we measured.
Well, I mean, as far as going over speeding 50, 60, 70 miles an hour.
Right. I'm just
in the drag racing. I need to know more about those kinds of that kind of data before we make a decision tonight.
Yeah, they did give you the percentages in there. I can pull the numbers out, but there is a finite number on those that were measured as far as, those percentages came from a number. I can find them real quick if you'd like to know, but it is in the study, at least the percentages. And relative to, you asked a second question on the accidents. I did reach out to the police department and said, okay, during this time since the speed tables have gone in, have we had any accidents or any problems resulting from the speed tables? They indicated to their knowledge we hadn't. That doesn't mean that people haven't gone over them and maybe ruined their muffler or something of that nature, but nothing.
But I heard 6 or 7 major accidents. Is that just not true?
Well, no, the 6 or 7 major accidents I believe the resident quoted were over the course of time leading up to the speed tables.
And Ron, if you're going to go, I think also if you're going to go look at Canal, you got to go look at 10-400 and 9600. I mean, if you're saying, we got accidents here, I'm going, well, I'll tell you, SR 92, I mean, our 6000 West keeps having accidents. We keep meeting with UDOT saying, what can we do at 6000?
Yeah.
Now, we don't want to have anyone hurt, but we seem to have higher situations. There are been accidents. The reason why the council's kind of been responsive, there has been some accidents on Canal, and we're trying to respond because they've hit homes or things, and you are nervous. There, you've got the Murdoch Trail there, and some things. So but we also have the problems like you're bringing. Did we just move it over to 10-400 where we have 3 parks down that road?
Yeah.
We have a school. We have 2 schools on that road.
Seems a lot more dangerous on 10-400.
That's our concern. And are there accidents on 10-400? Well, yeah, I've seen them myself. You got them at 6000 West. You got them at 6400 West. You got them down there by Freedom. Doug, you've been saying we need to put a stop sign up on 10-400 there at 5600 West. I was going, we could mitigate. We could decide to slow all the traffic, and we can put speed bumps everywhere if that's one of the options. We just got to decide. The problem is, what I see with Canal, it's wide. And the one section coming from Alpine Highway down to 6000 is wider, and that probably has brought some kids that feel comfortable going a little, and I say kids, all of us feel more comfortable because it's a little wider to go a little faster.
Yeah.
And so we were trying to address it. I don't know if the speed bumps address it adequately.
It's also true that the safest speed limit, safest speed to drive is the speed that the driver is comfortable driving. And if the road is wide, if you try to slow it down or you make it too fast, it's less safe. That's just the data. It's simple. And that's why they have the 85% rule. They do 85% of what the average driver goes because we're going to go 15% higher, like Scott is saying. If it's 45, they'll go 50. If it's 35, they'll go 40. But the road is designed for a specific speed. And I don't think 30 miles an hour is that speed. And we have a road that's less safe, that has more hazards on it, 10-400 that's 35? How can we?
Well, let's
make
lower it
that
to 30.
decision?
Well, no, and
I
think
mean, you're
that's-
making an argument to lower it to 30 on 10-400.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. I
Yeah.
think there's some discussion about
Yeah.
what's our traffic, the
Right.
speed. But I think what you're bringing up, Ron, and this is what we can lower the speed, but if people feel comfortable going 25, because if it's narrower, they do slow down.
That's
The question is this the road to try to narrow them down on? Is Canal the correct road to narrow and to try to have everything slow? And maybe we do it on every road. I'm just saying, but that's some of the things we're discussion.
I think also we have to take into account sometimes when we're told we're not listening, you have to remember that we're listening to a lot of people. And so we have people on Canal Boulevard that are telling us they have a problem, but then also we're having to listen to people on 10-400 that are now saying they're having bigger problems because of these speed bumps. And, seeing excess traffic, seeing excess safety issues. And so also you got to listen to the survey results. You have almost over 85% of the people who are telling us that they don't like these. And so for me, I need to listen to all the people in Highland. That is my number one goal here, is to remember that Highland as a whole, we need to understand, what do we want? Listen to everyone.
Sir, please, we're going to keep the comments here.
This is a traffic toolbox, and basically what our goal was to be able to come up with some temporary solutions and see if they worked, and see how Highland City felt about them, see if they solved the problem. We also have people that are having other issues as well, and I want to be able to move these, because they are temporary, to other locations and let other people in the queue use them. With that said, though, we know this is a problem, and there has to be a solution that not just appeases the residents there, but also is good for Highland as a whole as well. And I think that's not a solution. Yeah.
Do you want to go first? So I agree with most of what you said, Councilwoman Rodella. One thing I think you have to remember, though, on Canal Boulevard, there are sections which don't have a lot of driveways entering them. So Ron's argument is valid. However, the west end, you have all the homes emptying on it. On the east end, you've got Ridgeview up there, 689 residences. When it's done, they're going to enter Canal Boulevard basically from two roads. So, well, I think it makes sense to maybe raise the speed limit up to 35 and things. And I like Andy's idea that we consider other traffic mitigating things. But I think before you take the speed tables out, we probably ought to have those in place and see if they work. Because it's easy to say, oh, well, we can do this, pull out the speed tables, everybody's racing again. It just seems like we need to try to find some solution, because we've had a lot of issues. But Canal Boulevard, yes, it's a major collector, but there are sections of it designed for higher speeds than others. And I think you need to take into the fact that, like Madison Avenue area, that they have homes that empty out on Canal Boulevard. And Ridgeview, I think you have to be careful, because there are more and more people on bikes on Canal Boulevard. There are more and more people crossing right at the top of that hill with that flashing light, which one side is still hidden by that tree, and I think is a risk. So I think we have to kind of think about options on that. Yeah, we could make everything 100 miles an hour in the city to make people just drive fast, but I think you have to really kind of take a lot of things into consideration. That's kind of where I'm coming from. So I wouldn't take the speed tables out until you put these other things in, because I think we heard a lot of complaints on Canal Boulevard, and I don't buy the deal that I'm going to drive to a different street because I have to slow down for a speed bump. I mean, that may be true for some people, but I'm not sure that. I mean, I could go a different way.
And tell me that. I've had three people tell me they were taking 10-400 because they are not going to go over those speed bumps.
Well, let's put a speed bump over there. Yeah.
But I mean, I live off of 10-400 also. I saw a child get hit right in front of my house, and Kurt came over, running over right because we've had such an issue there. I can definitely say traffic is backed up there. There's a lot of safety issues there, and definitely it's one of those areas that's now having more safety issues. But I think residents also have great solutions as well. I was just reading over like the Facebook comments on this, and some residents were like, allow less restrictions on fencing, so we can allow more fencing around our house to be able to have more protection, but also be able to have protection for our kids to stay in. That was one of the solutions, well, actually several solutions, where So several solutions from residents that live there saying, hey, it used to be we could have fencing in front of our house, and now that changed and we are not allowed to have it. But there's a lot of solutions that we can get from our residents as well.
I think that there is a legitimate safety issue on this stretch of Canal Boulevard, and we need to do something about it. There's been some talk about whether or not speed tables are appropriate on collector streets. I do note that the National Association of City Transportation Officials explicitly endorses speed tables on collector streets and/or transit and emergency response routes.
You say they endorse it?
Yes. When I went out and looked at the area, actually one of the things that was a significant safety concern to me, this was after the speed tables went in, were the number of pedestrians that were on the street along the north side. Regardless of what we do with speed tables, I think that some islands right there, and Andy suggested that maybe those fit in well with Z crosswalks or something, it would be an appropriate thing. Maybe as the traffic calming solution, maybe in addition to whatever else goes in. But if we have a major collector that we've got a lot of pedestrians walking on the asphalt, that strikes me as a safety concern. Lastly, we could certainly put in less intrusive speed tables. As Andy pointed out, these have the 1-inch lip right at the beginning, and they're very short across the top. So they really, as far as speed tables go, they're very intrusive. If we wanted to keep speed tables in there, we could put things that, once they're permanent, they don't have that lip. We could put a larger table across the top and put something in that's better suited for, say, a 30-mile-an-hour transit. I'm in agreement with Ron that I'm not sure we have data to really make a decision at this point. I would be in favor of the option that Andy highlighted of keeping them in place until September, which gets us.
What is it you're needing? I mean, so Andy, how long have they been up?
Sorry, I need to push the button. They've been up, on average, 2 solid months now, I guess I would say, because the one didn't go until mid-May, right? And so you've had 2 months for people to kind of get used to them.
My question is,
although the data we have is only a week's worth of data.
So is it the data you're looking for? So, I mean, naturally, I think you're going to find out a speed table or the bumps are going to slow the traffic. The question is, by slowing, what are we doing to other roads? And you're going, okay, let's go put them on other roads. I mean, if you're really going to go put them in, if you're saying we're going to put them on Canal, I think you better go put them on 9600 and you better go put them on 10400, because you are causing issues, in my opinion, in other roads. And I know, Scott, and I appreciate it, because I actually had a couple of residents share, and I noticed I used to come and turn on 10400 and go down 66,000 to connect this little, on Canal, and I don't do that anymore. I go purposely down 10400, and then I had another neighbor said, well, what are you doing with those speed things? You've changed my traffic, the way I'm driving. And I was going, it's just, I think that's what I'm saying. We're going to solve one issue when we create another, and so we've got that fine balance.
So can we come up on some data showing us that the traffic's increased on 10400 compared to Canal?
Well, maybe that's what we
Can
need.
I-
I think the tough part about, because I kind of anticipated that question, how do we factually prove that? Tough part about 10400, because that's probably the most likely alternative route to Canal, right, is 10400. Tough part about that is during the same study window, while we do have some some older counts on 10400, the tough part is you also put Mountain Ridge Park in the middle of that. And so I don't know, do you attribute the changes in volume on 10400 to Mountain Ridge, or do you attribute that to people taking alternate directions? We haven't counted 10400 in the last year, to where we could say, okay, this was 10400 just before the speed tables, and this is after. We'd be looking at something that's, I don't know, I think we have a data that's a year or two old, but So 10400 has had a major change in the middle of that with Mountain Ridge, and so I don't know how you allocate the data, because I did think through that, because I thought that's a likely request out of the council. Well, let's count 10400. Let's see if it changed. But you kind of would have needed to count it right before the speed tables, and then right during, and unfortunately we don't have the right before. We could go count it right now, but I'm not sure how you would interpret the results. That makes sense.
Thank you. Councilmember Bill, so you have some comments?
Yeah, so you asked what we would need to make a decision. So I'm in favor of leaving them in place and at least start this school year and kind of see what happens there. But to me, the big piece of data that I would need to know is, if we take these out, what do we do instead? Because I think to me, it's not a great option to just take them out and then consider studying it, because these took us 9 months, I think, from when we approved them first to get them put in. So if we were going to order any other kind of temporary thing or anything else, I just think we should know what our plan would be for taking these out. And I think that 2 months to have them both in, but I think a lot of the survey comments were received in that first period, right?
Brooklyn,
I'm looking at them.
Do you have an answer? Like, did we get most of our answers initially? I don't remember, to answer quickly. Did we get most of our answers initially, or have we continued to get a sustained response through the course of the time?
Yeah, so when we first opened the survey, I remember it went from 0 to 800 within like a week.
Mm-hmm.
And then it kind of capped out at around 1,000, and then they just started trickling in like within the last couple weeks or so. So yeah, within a week, they really just skyrocketed.
So with this, I've heard enough from the council. It sounds like the majority would like to keep them in place till September, and maybe the direction is saying, hey, before we remove them, what is the next step? Is that what I'm hearing from the council?
Exactly.
Okay, let's have a motion to that.
Can I ask Andy one more thing? I know we're talking about this later as well, but there was one other neighborhood that I think was on the list for the speed tables, which is the Carly, Tall, Hillary, that neighborhood. Do you know where I mean, Kim?
Yeah, that was that behind Mountain Ridge. There was
that's
an area there.
the L-shaped street. I know where you're talking about.
Yeah,
Yorkshire.
I just want to make sure that they're on the list.
We studied their road before we did the traffic calming toolbox, but they haven't actually, as a neighborhood, filed a traffic calming request, and so certainly they're on our radar, but they aren't on the list of what we're going to talk about later, because they're not the ones that filed that request. But
did Angel Gate file one? Did Angel Gate up in Beacon Hills also file one? I thought they.
There was a neighborhood. I didn't actually get a traffic calming request from those coming all the way down off Lighthouse. But the one that filed it was the neighborhood about the cut through to what turns into Westfield Road. That's the one that we had filed. There was a few others that are up in that area that we're going to talk about. The one intriguing idea that I heard mentioned by a couple members of the council that you may contemplate is, if you want to entertain some alternatives, get the alternatives in place and then pull the speed tables if you're going to pull them. Get the alternatives in place and pull them. We might be able to look at some alternatives that could stay up for the winter, although they get harder to see in the winter. Obviously, we'll have to use some delineators, et cetera. That's an intriguing idea, because then you're not just removing all control. You're saying, okay, let's switch from the speed tables to this other, and leave the speed tables in place until you can get those others ordered. That's an intriguing idea, just because then you don't go from control to nothing. You switch forms of control, and then you measure that other form of control.
Is it true that these speed tables, temporary, cannot be kept through the winter?
Well,
with that 1-inch lip, I can't imagine.
Here's what is true. We didn't hook them down anticipating them staying for the winter. So we put lots of bolts in them, but we didn't put bolts in every hole. And what would have to happen is the blades would just have to lift over the top of them. Like, there's no way that we could plow across them. No. The manufacturer did tell us that they had a few local communities that were in snow conditions that had put them down intending for them to stay. This is anecdotal, because I don't have data on this. He said that a lot of those communities had found that the plows kept catching a few pieces, and so they were debating whether they'd really switch it out to a concrete model or something, something that could stay in place over the winter.
I hope we can resolve this by September.
But we didn't actually, I would guess, if I'm being realistic, based on, noting what Councilmember Bills had noted, that I was shocked how long it took us to get these ones. And so I don't want to represent to the council, hey, yeah, we can call tomorrow and we get a bunch of these rubber curbs and they'll be here in 2 weeks, because nothing I seem to order comes in 2 weeks. You might be able to get some by fall and get them in by fall, and then try to put those in so that they could stay in over the winter, pull the speed tables for the winter, but leave these other controls with delineators and little curbed islands that we could plow through. Because the idea is between those, if you put them in permanently, is you plow through them, right? And find some, but it's not going to be cheap, right? I mean, you spent $35,000 on these speed tables. You go and buy islands, because like I was noting, if you just put one island in the middle of here, you're not going to achieve the purpose. You're going to have to put a few different constrictions. You're going to have when you're changing, we're going for traffic calming. You're trying to change the culture of the road, right? If you will, if you can embrace that a road has a culture. Sounds like a funny term, but you're changing the culture of the road, and so you're going to have to put a few of them. So again, you're probably going to spend. I'm just going to toss it out another $35,000 on rubber islands and delineators and stuff like that to try and populate the corridor. I don't want to represent that this picture that we're looking at on the screen is $5,000. That's not a $5,000 solution either. That's it'll be a fair amount of money, but that's an intriguing idea that you don't change one to, you don't just completely take everything off. You go, okay, speed tables, let's try something else, but let's get those in place.
And as we are putting new temporary things in the future, I would very much like for us to decide before we put them in what data we need.
I agree.
So that if we need comparison data, that we can get that before we put them in.
And what the duration of the data collection period is.
Yeah, and I think 'cause that's now we're 2 months.
Yep.
That's why I think that's that learning process.
Yeah.
So, Andy, let me ask you: there was a comment about the sidewalk, and I've seen kids walking or individuals. I always say down Canal, and they're not on the sidewalk. We have the trail goes across, and it does not go to the west. And I know that some people think that they're going to curve up into Canal, or the Murdoch Canal, and come down, and there's like a little thing by the old Stephen Roberts house. Why does the sidewalk, now I know that the property is owned by, it looks like Provo River. Why was there never sidewalk done along Canal? Because there's a gap where there's not a sidewalk. Do you have any,
I don't know. I think one thing that I've been told that happens there, and the adjacent residents would know better than me, but I've been told that a number of people that exercise on the canal will actually come and park in this area. And so that some of those because there's a couple pretty well-worn dirt paths between the road and the trail, right? And I've been told that some people will come and park right here and almost use it like a trailhead, right? Because it's pretty well unrestricted. You can park along there. But yeah, as to why there's no sidewalk, if I had to guess, Mayor, it probably comes down to money. And it was tough to have a developer put in the sidewalk on something that they didn't have frontage. And there was probably a decision made that, well, there's probably not a need for a sidewalk there because people can just jump onto the trail. So, a cheaper solution would be to make a couple of connections to the trail that are more paved. Would that solve the problem? I don't know, but that's one thing you could do. But I really don't have a good answer as to why is it not there. I just have my suspicions because it's, doesn't front any homes that the developer didn't build it, and so it didn't get built yet.
So then coming back, a couple of council members made about maybe the accidents that happen along here. So I'd recommend during that time period, if we're keeping up till September, maybe this council, you go and find out not only were there accidents, maybe what were the contributing factors that maybe created that accident to happen. And then we can maybe even ask the same question about some other roads where we've seen the similar, because I think that will help us. I mean, because I am aware of probably, I think there were 4 or 5 that have happened. I know there's one home that's been hit several times. I know there's been a couple of fences, some trees taken out. And so we are trying to address some of those safety things. The sidewalk to me is another safety thing. Okay, do we have a motion on this?
You have 3 suggested ones, so you got one to remove them, and then if you go to the next one, you've got one to leave them until September, and if you go to the next one, you've got one to basically convert them to permanent.
Mr. Mayor, I move that the speed tables be left in place until September to allow for speeds to be measured for a longer duration, with the findings being reported to the council for further evaluation, and the speed tables not removed until council approves.
Okay, I have a motion by Doug.
I'll second that.
I have a second by Ron. For any further discussion before we go to the vote?
I just want to ensure that we look at other options as well, so that we can have something in place within that duration of time.
And that was my intent with not removed until the council approves. That seemed easier than specifying all of that.
If I can ask for clarification, if you do want the staff to go and purchase some of these other items and get them in, I think you would need to give us that direction, because basically, if you want those to go into place before winter, you've got to order them now, right? I mean, you know, based on what we found with the previous ones. Now, they might have a whole warehouse full of those rubber curbs, and they might be able to deliver them tomorrow, but at least anything else we order, they can't deliver tomorrow.
Do we know, though, what, is that something we need to have as a discussion item to be discussed? Do we even know what option the council wants to go with?
I think we need to know more options.
Yeah, I think we need more information about cost
have
and
an alternate
what's really
plan
available.
to be brought back, and that's fine
Like
too. I'm just trying to clarify so we knew which direction we were going.
So let's be transparent here. We're losing our city engineer. We're going to a contractor. Some of this is driven by engineer. And so we are going to head into a gap period. I'm just, we have a gap that we're going to have here. And so just be aware of that as the gap. Tavis has been a subcontractor for the city
For years.
He's mainly done with water. He's usually been an engineer on the water. No, Tavis knows the city. Tavis lives here in Highland.
So we have 2 contract engineers we'll work with, Tavis and another gentleman named Nate Meekum, but they are contract, meaning we are not their only clients. And while he'll serve as interim, know that this is probably one of those projects that is not going to be top priority, just because there is a gap there. And they're going to do what they have to for us as interim and more in what they can. But capital projects and development review are going to be our first priority.
Okay. I think we have a motion and a second, so that will be the vote. Is there any clarification on what you're voting on? I think everyone's clear. Okay. Heather, you have a question? Ron. I'm sorry. It was Doug and Ron. That passes 5-0. We'll now move on to the next action item, which is Ridgeview Landscape and Snow Maintenance Agreement. And that will be Rob.
Me.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, that is Andy.
Yeah.
Can I make a comment real quick, Mayor? On these things that we're going to discuss here, we could kind of move them along, because I'm going to have to leave shortly after 10, because I've got to go prepare
Council,
for a
we do
state
have
track.
4 closed session items that we need to.
I'm not going to be here.
Brief,
Yeah.
Bring you up to speed on a couple items. So if we know what, if you've looked at the packet, you've studied, if we're there, the only thing I would recommend as we're looking at this, I guess we're going to try to move a little faster, is there was one snowplow area that we were looking with Ridgeview. Do you have the snowplow map you can put up there?
Yeah, 2 slides forward.
Okay, right here, the only thing I see is the snowplow. All these are city roads. My one concern is over by the commercial district here. We have the roundabout that we are pushing snow off of Canal down to that roundabout. We really don't have anywhere, how are we supposed to remove that snow other than push it into the roundabout? My recommendation is to push back on the agreement and say we will not take on that portion from Canal down to the roundabout. I think everything else, what I viewed, looked okay. Now, council, if we need discussion or if you're ready. Or do we need presentation by the...
No, I'm
I'll
ready.
give you the 30-second version. This is something we've been needing to do since the development started, and it's something that we really think we ought to get in place before all the memories fade. That being said, Councilmember Courtney found a few minor cleanup on the drawings, and then their attorney's still reviewing the documents. So your suggested motion, if you were to give us the guidance that the mayor just indicated that you wanted, that little road's called Oak Brook. If you could give us that guidance with your motion that the HOA plow Oak Brook and the roundabout. Your suggested motion also has that non-substantive changes as worked out by the two attorneys are okay, and then we would also suggest that non-substantive drawing cleanup's okay. So we do have a motion for you if you want to expedite. Other than that, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Hey, Rob, did I read the agreement correctly that this tells whose job it is to plow those roads, but it puts them into the regular city priority order, correct? So it's not like we're prioritizing these.
Correct. We made it specific that we're not, all of our work for this maintenance of any kind of area that we're doing, either snow clearing, snow plowing, or any of the park strip areas, it's just according to our budget and needs. They don't get any special entitlement to preferential treatment.
Perfect.
Just saying whether it's us or someone else who's doing it.
Thank you.
And then also be aware we are taking on the maintenance. Now, Scott, the one question I had, Scott, I thought the maintenance in Canal Boulevard, the landscaping, was going to be the HOA. Do you remember that agreement different?
Well, the landscaping's always been the HOA, I thought. And I think they want to keep the landscaping.
No,
Yeah,
they
they're willing
want
to
us to take
maintain the
over
landscape.
Canal.
It's just the snow clearing. They're saying they never
It's just the
intended
snow
to clear the
clearing.
snow on the sidewalks.
Yeah.
Is what
I thought that we had to take over the landscaping on Canal.
not on Canal. They're
Not
saying
on Canal.
They're saying
Oh,
they'll
okay. I
maintain the
misunderstood.
landscape maintenance on Canal. They just want us to clear the sidewalks, not in all the sidewalks that aren't in front of the commercial areas. They're in agreement that the commercial areas can plow their own, but everything that's kind of adjacent to the residences, that's really kind of backdoor on those fences, or backdoor to the residents on the fences, they're asking that we plow that snow off the sidewalks, but they are willing to continue to maintain the
landscaping.
landscape and do the sprinklers.
Do we have a landscape map?
It's shown as green in the
Can you
landscape
go back to
plan. So if you go,
Brooklyn?
No, I had red on the one I saw.
that
So-
one is the landscape plan.
Oh, this is, okay.
The next one that shows the city doing it is the snow.
Okay.
Yeah,
clearing
it's-
of
sorry.
I got the confusion
It's
on it.
there's so many activities in such a large development that we had to have multiple maps, and you have to use the same colors over and over again. Sorry about that.
And this one, okay. Just on.
So
But
if you go
this
to the
is
middle
just-
one, Brooklyn.
Okay, we're fine.
So the middle one shows that the city's doing the snow on Canal, and then the city's doing the snow clearing. When I say the snow, I'm talking about the sidewalks. The snow clearing on the sidewalks on Canal in front of the residences, and we're doing North County Boulevard and 10100 North, except for those frontages along the commercial. The commercial frontages are always either the HOA or the commercial entities.
Am I right in the fact that this is exactly what we agreed to with the developer at that time? We're just following through with this?
More or
Confirm
less,
what
there
we
were
had
a few
already
things that
agreed
weren't,
to? 'Cause it
that
all
weren't
sounds
unstated,
familiar.
and there was expectations both ways, right? Developer thought we were clearing the snow on Canal, and we thought they were.
Yeah, but
doing
we
it, so-
resolved that at some point.
Well, this attempts to resolve it.
Okay.
We haven't yet resolved it. This attempts to resolve it. So
Will in about 5 minutes.
In large,
This is our resolve.
in large measure, the parties have come to an agreement on who maintains what. We think it's a good thing because memories will continue to fade and the document will stay in place.
Will you
So-
quit looking at me when you say memories?
I think the staff's done a great job
I do too.
negotiating this.
By the way,
so-
thank you for dealing with this also, Andy.
Are you ready for a
Okay.
motion, Mr. Mayor?
Yep.
I move that the city council approve the landscape and snow maintenance agreement with the Ridgeview Development and authorize the mayor to sign the agreement, allowing for non-substantive changes to the agreement and minor changes to the diagrams to be worked through by the respective attorneys.
Can
I'll
ask,
second it.
can I ask for a clarification on the mayor's point on Oak Brook?
Are you going
Oh,
to add?
yes, and with the stipulation that the Holbrook snow clearing, plowing should be pushed to the HOA.
Okay, the little stretch of road between Canal and the roundabout, Oak Brook Drive, is cleared by the HOA.
Scott, you still get a second on that?
Yes.
Okay, we have a motion by Doug, second by Scott. We ready to vote? Passes 5-0. We're now moving on to Ridgeview parking restrictions near Lone Peak High School. Will be a fast one here, Andy.
Yeah, I'll give you the fast version. In in May, we received a traffic control or traffic calming request, and the residents noted that the high school kids were parking on Willowstone Drive. Really what happens through the school year is more and more kids can drive, right? And so you start off the school year and none of the sophomores can drive, and by the end of the school year, most of the sophomores can drive. And so those cars were finding a home on Willowstone. We did a survey for the residents and said, what would you like? Would you like no parking anytime? Would you like no parking during school hours? Or would you like, kind of a permit parking program? In a general, quickly, the residents all noted they thought there was a problem. We surveyed the 60 homes closest to the school, and only 21 people replied. The residents all said, yeah, we think it's a problem. Next slide. This is what they preferred. The combination of no parking anytime and no parking between 7 to 3:30 does outweigh the permit parking if you look at the total percentage. We also talked to the police department. They said, okay, if we're going to change things up there, what's most enforceable? Police department much prefers something that's signage driven, meaning the sign tells you what you can do. And so they would prefer to go to the no parking 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. and then also during school events because they find that when they have permit parking conditions, people forget to give their friends and neighbors permits, the police write them tickets, they get mad. So the police's recommendation is to go that direction, and if you do go that direction, what we would say is that right now we have various signages in place. We would say except for 10100, 10100 is going to stay no parking at any time except for by the tennis courts. All the rest of this we would change to be the same, whatever you provide guidance to. What we're suggesting is let's start and restrict it 7 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. That's basically your main school hours, and during school events, like football games and, large choir performances, whatever drives large traffic. And that we ought to put that across the board in all those areas that are close to the school. And that's basically those areas that are shown on the maps. With that, we've got a suggested motion for you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Scott?
I'm just going to express my opinion. I don't think the high school students should ever park in this high-density neighborhood. Personally, of course, I have trouble why every student at Lone Peak has to drive anyway, but, I jog up along the west side of Lone Peak when school's in session a lot. That huge parking lot, the ground we sold to the high school, often sits empty. And so I don't think that the students should be parking over in residential streets. And the reason they do is, one, it's a little closer to the door, and two, they don't have to pay the $25 parking permit. I think, personally, and I think the 7 to 3:30 thing and school events would be okay, but at the same time, I just think if a resident there sees a high school student park in front of their place, they should call the police. I think the police ought to come and ticket them, $25 at least. I don't know, we'd have to change our code, I guess. And if they do it again, tow it, because that's the best way. Deterrent will stop them from parking in there. And we knew it'd be a problem. That's why I argued against Boyer putting too many parking spots around their park. Because it'd become another parking lot for the high school. So if there was no parking around the high school, it'd be a different story. But that whole southwest part of that parking lot is always empty. So, all we're doing is, let's not promote parking in the residential area.
Do you believe the 7:30 to 3:30 will help us accomplish that?
I think too long, and I would just say no parking by students ever in there, but that's when they park at 7:30.
The hard thing is no parking by students is tough for the police to write a ticket to, right? How do you know which ones are students? Besides the residents coming out, I think while the police chief's not here, I think that would be the difficult thing to enforce is you've got to put something on the sign that says, if you fit this category, you can't park here, whatever that whatever that restriction is. Either you're no parking anytime, you're no parking during this time, or if you're no parking without a permit. And that's where because if this proves to be a problem, you can always come and go more restricted, right? This felt like the right place to land to start with, and start here and see how it goes, and then if that really truly doesn't solve the problem or causes other intended program problems, you can always come back and revisit the issue.
Council, do we have a motion?
Sorry, one quick question. So if they do get caught parking there, what is the consequence for that? I just want to make sure there's
the police will write them a ticket, I would think.
Thank you.
I don't know how much the ticket costs, but they'd write them a ticket.
Okay, I'm good.
Rob, how much is the ticket for parking violation?
I don't know off the top of my head, but it'd be an infraction level, so not a misdemeanor.
It's fine.
It's the lowest level of the one basically.
The same as
Okay.
at our park
Okay.
past 10.
Can the school resource officer like help with that? Are they allowed to do stuff off campus?
The school resource officer typically is a police officer,
So they can like help with that.
still, yes. It'd be just a matter of how Lone Peak internally handles their staffing and management of that, but yes, that could be a resource.
Okay, do we have a motion?
I'll make the motion. I move that the Highland City Council direct staff to implement further hour-based, event-based parking restrictions as been discussed in the Ridgeview development to help combat the parking problems caused by Lone Peak parking overflow. And I don't know if it's really overflow. That's the issue. The restrictions shall prohibit parking during school hours and school events. 10100 North shall remain designed as no parking anytime except for the designated parking stalls near the tennis courts.
Second.
Yeah, motion by Scott, second by Doug. Okay, if we're ready, let's vote. That passes 5-0. We're now moving on to number F, which is an action item, which is a plat amendment of the Armstrongs and the Country Club, Plat D. Remember, this is a parcel we worked with the landowner on. So.
Yes, and we have, Ron is here, has been sitting patiently through this meeting. Just to highlight the quick version, we've approved one plat amendment for this. This cleaned up the right-of-way for this lot. As the Armstrongs are looking at doing their addition on their home that they've been trying to work for, it just didn't work with the rear setback for the lot. So they talked with their neighbor, the Carriers, and I received a message from the Carriers supporting this to adjust their mutual property line. It keeps the properties the same. It just shifts it kind of 5 feet on one side and 5 feet on the other to help the Armstrongs get the addition they like. So you can go ahead. That's the one we approved previously. We haven't recorded it. We're going to do this all as one big plat just so it's nice and clean for the records. On the next slide, public utilities are remaining the same. It's a little bit unusual, but there's not a major impact. We don't anticipate any utility impacts in there anyway. We're getting some fans in here because it's very warm.
It's like 400 degrees in here.
Yes. Yeah. We've been having some AC issues with the city offices, so. On the next slide, you can kind of see this is the purple line is kind of the existing. The red is the shift, how it's kind of just rotating between the two properties. And on the next page, we got the actual draft of the plat showing the change. So staff is in support of this. We don't see any issues with it, but happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, we recommend approval with 3 stipulations. One was just that it includes the previous plat amendments. We all do it in one document. We get all the other documents recorded, all the quitclaim deeds and exchange of property handled before we do the plat. And then I didn't know if we were going to have the plat before tonight. So I was just saying that you'd authorize us to approve the actual form of the plat before it gets.
Council, any of you have problems with this proposal?
No, I just have one question. Does this have right of way on each side of that property line, and will that adjust with it?
The public utility easements are on both sides. They're not being adjusted. They're just remaining as they are.
But they'll still be functional.
There's still a functional
5 feet.
utility corridor through that area. The property line doesn't change that at all.
Okay.
It's still an 18-foot
Yeah,
corridor.
18 feet through there.
It just changes a little bit who owns some of the property that has the easement on it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
Good job, staff.
Really
Is there a
good.
motion?
There is a motion.
I move that the city council approve the amendment to Alpine Country Club lots 14 and 9 with the 3 stipulations recommended by staff and the 5 findings proposed by staff.
I'll second it.
There's 5?
In the packet there are.
There's 3. Okay, Ron and Scott, you seconded that?
I did.
So it was Ron and Scott. I'm sorry, it was
Doug.
Doug and Scott. Doug. Doug was the motion, Scott was second. Okay, that passes 5-0. We're now on to item number G, which is ordinance right-of-way permit regulations, and that will be Rob.
Thank you. We discussed this briefly at the last council meeting. We just wanted to make some clarification so that when someone does a driveway or other access, they cut our curb. Historically, we haven't been requiring them to get a permit. We want to make sure they do come into the city. We do have some spacing requirements for driveways from roads and other driveways for safety. We want to make sure they actually repair any damage to sidewalks when they do the construction. So the council has already adopted fees and bonds for this. We're now updating. we tried to do this backwards. It's just one of those things that got continued from April till now. So this is the ordinance. It cleans up some language in the code, requires permits to come to the city. It also says that if our road has been reconstructed, constructed, or repaved in the last 3 years, they can't do any work within it unless they repave the entire road from intersection to intersection. So if we lay a brand new pretty road and a utility company decides they want to put a new line, we say, well, either you wait 3 years or you redo the entire road for us. And Andy's actually had an experience where you had a utility company that decided it was worth it to do the entire road. So we leave that up to them. So it's not a hard no, just we don't want to lose a brand new road we just got.
Right.
So those are the major changes. Any questions?
Just to clarify, to get intent of council on the record, that the repaving on either side of the cut, should the cut happen in an intersection, the piece about the city public works director
Yes.
being able to determine it allows us to hit all 4 directions in that case if we need
They'll
to.
figure out what the best way
What-
is to
what
make
the
sure
best-
we
So
Okay.
let's
Yep.
look
the
at
road.
big picture here. So if someone comes and does a subdivision and they need to come in, they'd have to do the whole section. If there's a commercial, they have to come and do a sewer connection into the road. You're saying they have to do the whole thing.
If it's done within the last 3 years.
Yeah.
We don't want our brand new roads because it degrades every cut. I mean, Andy could tell us, but it's like every cut reduces the life by about how many years?
Every time you cut a road, it takes about 4 to 8 years off the life of the road. The reason is for that, because that's often like, well, how does that do that? Is if you come and pave a brand new road, it takes about 4 to 8 years for the cracks to surface because the sun and the cooling creates cracks, right? So you automatically go to that cracked condition by cutting the road. So
yes, we do have an exception for emergency work. So if a sewer line breaks, we don't need to redo the entire road to fix it. But if you're trying to do some kind of other construction to a new road, we want the entire road redone.
I'll make the motion.
Okay.
So I move that the Highland City Council adopt and approve the proposed amendments to Chapter 12 of the Municipal Code, talking about cuts in roads.
Second.
I have a motion by Scott, second by Doug. Any further discussion? Passes 5-0. We have our next item is resolution of interlocal agreement with Draper City. Jay, you're doing that one.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Before you tonight is a resolution and agreement that addresses Senate Bill 185 that was passed this year, and it's a requirement to maintain a list of at least 3 approved third-party building inspectors who can provide a building inspection in the event the city cannot provide an inspection within the required 3 business days. To go over the main points of the agreement, cities agree to provide up to 8 hours per month of free building inspection services. Cities may refuse to inspect for the other city if, for example, workload does not allow or would otherwise be impacted. Cities do not take on liability for the other city's employees. Those cities are responsible for paying, insuring, and providing other benefits to the responding building inspector as usual. Are there any questions about this?
I don't have a question, but just to explain my thinking, that I will be voting against this, not because I object to making such an agreement with Draper, but because my reading of state law says that the council is not competent to make such an agreement with Draper, and that the mayor is actually the one who needs to make that agreement.
Well, I'm the competent one. Is that what you're saying? I just want to make on the record, you getting this, Heather, that he just said that the mayor's competent. Because other times
I can discuss that in more detail if anyone's interested, but in light of timing, I will refrain from going through all of my points.
Council directs the agreement.
It does.
Yeah.
I think the council should. I have no issue with the council.
Yeah.
I don't think that anybody else does either, but I very strong in my reading of state law in that regard.
That it's the mayor who's a member of the city council but is not a voting member of the city council.
That it is the executive office of the public agency, rather than the legislative office. That is my reading of things.
This is administrative versus legislative.
Got it. Wow.
But we certainly can direct it.
Or give a recommendation.
Yeah, I would have absolutely no problem with the city council recommending the mayor to enter into such an agreement or endorsing the agreement, and should the mayor choose to enter into it or anything along those lines. But
is there any other discussion or anything on the motion?
I'll make a motion. I move that the Highland City Council direct the mayor to approve the interlocal agreement with Draper City and adopt the proposed resolution. Is that okay?
I have a motion by
Close,
Scott.
Doug. But no cigar.
Is there no second?
I'll second that, but I want to maybe alter it a little bit. Move the city council. When you say direct, that's saying what we have to do. I think there's got to be something in there, some language. How can Rob help us here? How can we put this where we're saying the mayor?
Should we say kindly suggest?
Approval.
Is there really a difference if we use the word approve versus direct? Rob, are we getting technical?
I know Doug disagrees with me. I don't believe there's a big issue with
this entire thing is getting technical. If you don't want to get technical,
now, Ron, you second. Are you seconding the motion that Scott did?
I'll change it to kindly direct.
Are you seconding that, or are you making an alternate motion? I just need to know if someone's seconding Scott's motion.
I'm going to make an alternate motion.
In that case, Mr. Mayor, we need to
vote on
see
the
if there
original.
is a second to Scott's motion
There
before
is, I
anyone
agree.
can make an alternate.
I agree. Scott made a motion. Is there anyone that'd like to second Scott's motion? Seeing none, we'll now see if there's another motion.
Based on recommendation of our council, I move the city council approve the interlocal agreement with Draper City and adopt the proposed resolution.
I have a motion by Ron.
I'll second.
I have a second by Kim.
Discussion.
Is there
How does that resolve the issue with the mayor supposed to make the agreement?
It doesn't, but just because I have a reading of state law doesn't mean that my reading of state law wins, and doesn't mean that my reading of state law is correct.
Yeah, and I made the motion based on my assumption that I trust what Rob understands about this. And I respect Doug, but I
have no problem with that.
Is in a better position to know what's right.
Is there further discussion before you vote? If it's clear, everyone go ahead and vote. That passes 3-2. Okay, we now have a discussion item, which is campaign finance regulations. We're going to have that directed by Councilmember Ron Campbell.
We can do this very, very quickly. All it is are we willing to ask Rob to put together some amendments to the municipal code that would restrict the funding or the contributions by anybody that is got a land use proposal with the city from donating over $1,000 is the recommendation that I would like to put out there. That they can contribute up to $1,000, but nothing more than $1,000, because at that point it becomes, in my opinion, an influence on the council. If they have any matter that's a land use matter before the city, that they not be allowed to donate more than $1,000.
So what Ron's asking, does anyone have a concern putting this on the agenda for the future?
Is there enough?
Is there enough support?
If we can put something together that Rob's confident with the First Amendment issues, then I'm okay with it. I would also like to see additional reporting.
One more addition.
One additional report, right close to the election.
And I would support that as well.
Any other direction?
I'll be honest, I don't support it. I think that state law has enough restrictions that it is, and I don't want to allow more restrictions within the city. Because when you start restricting one area, then you need to start restricting another area. And so sometimes when you try and solve a problem, it just creates more problems on the other end. And I think that's one of these areas.
Is there enough council that would be amenable to discuss this and Brittany, you,
I'm down to talk about it.
okay, Scott?
I'd like to talk more about it, yeah. So I think you brought some ideas back, but I understand where Councilwoman Rodella is talking about, because, you know, I think it's hard enough to get people to run, and then you put all kinds of restrictions. It's kind of like, why bother? So I think we have to be really careful. Yeah, I know, and I know what you're trying to do, and I basically
And
support
LA
it, but-
has this in place.
Yeah.
I think we've got enough direction to bring this back as a further discussion item.
Yes.
Okay, we now have communication items, and we need, guys, we still have a closed session that has 4 items we need to discuss, just so you're looking at timing. Okay, we have item number 5A, which is the Alpine Highway fence, color, and mow strip. And that will be Andy.
So, Mayor and Council, Rob and I are going to kind of team up on this one. Last time when you, and I know you don't really want to talk about Alpine fence, so I'll make it quick because we've talked about it a number of times, but last time you asked me the question, is this fence a quality fence? The fence that has the foam in the middle and the concrete on the outsides. And I said, I really don't know. After that meeting, I talked to Josh, who's our park superintendent, who actually deals with the fences that are bordering a lot of spaces. And he says, well, we do have a fair amount of damage on it in various locations. So I said, all right, take me some pictures, help me understand, so I can share it with the council in case they want to revisit that decision. Because I didn't feel like I gave you very good guidance because I didn't know. The one thing I will note is that the company that supplies this fence was one of the ones that was a little more eager to respond. At least the one precast concrete company we talked to with the solid concrete fences weren't as interested in the segmental element of it. They'd have been interested in the big project, but the segmental element weren't as interested. But that doesn't mean they're the only one in town. It's just the one we got responses from. But these photos over the next couple slides show some of the damage that Josh was aware of, where the thin layer of concrete had peeled off or been knocked off, and you were seeing the foam exposed. And he knew that the goal was to, if we're going to put the money in, let's put the money into a good long-term fence. And now we're on to color, sorry. And so the question was, now that we've got a little more information, do you want to revisit that as we look at color? And so Rob took a little more pictures
You just
of
go back to the
color, and he can talk to color, and then we can sum up at the end.
So the next question was, we actually have applicants looking to come in, 5 people wanting to do this. They asked the question of what color should the fence be? If we want to do a uniform look, it's not something that we didn't think to address. It's a type of thing where we can do almost any color. It's just a paint on it. We're just asking, does the council have a preference for color? So we have some pictures. You have your standard kind of gray concrete look, or a more kind of beige tan stone look. On the next slide, nope, we don't have the next slide, but we have some that have like variated colors in it, where like each kind of block looks a little bit different. It's more just trying to get the council's. Oh, we're starting again.
What color do they want?
I don't know that they expressed a preference. We could leave it up to them and say, if you pick, maybe you pick a nice color and you get to set the tone for the rest of the fence because you're the first 5 to come in.
We said that this is though for the look of the city. I think we might want to.
I say the other thing you can do with the precast concrete fences is you can actually paint your yard side different than the city side, right? I mean, so that is with the paint. You're not necessarily stuck looking at what the city looks like on the other side. Typically, the patterns are the same on both sides, but color-wise, you can paint those totally different.
To answer your question about the potential of this changing our minds, no. Because if you look at where this is going to be on Alpine Highway, it's not exposed to, I don't believe we've had anybody go through the Alpine fence on Alpine Highway. Is that right?
These damages aren't from like somebody going through it. This is just time and wear.
Well,
on the
one,
photos.
It looks like the footing wasn't properly done. How were these damaged? Do we know?
Some might have been from I know sometimes it's not as resistant to the string trimmers, Josh told me. So you can see like the photo, and sorry, we're having technical difficulties with the file and it's locked up, but I know they told me that the string trimmers tend to have a little bit of effect on it. Like if you look at that bottom right photo, you can see where the string trimmers have probably hit the fence. And so a solution for that would be to then require a mow strip, you know, or something that kept the stringers, the trimmers off of it for that portion of the damage. And others, you know, the one on the left, I don't know what the issue was with that column, but it's kind of chipped off. And he just said overall that the foam core fence hasn't been as durable as the solid concrete fence. That's his observation on the different, frontages that we have, because we have a long stretch of them. So like I said, you could address part of it, putting a mow strip under it, if that's what you want to do. And that certainly keeps the mowers away from it and keeps the string trimmers away from it. But there is some other lifespan issues. Now, like I said, we're not necessarily trying to talk you out of it. That's not our point tonight. Our point is to say, hey, we gathered a little more information, and this foam core fence, it does show its wear. That's what we're talking about.
What was the cost difference between the two? Do you remember? You mentioned before.
My recollection, it was $8 a linear foot. That it was 107 versus 115.
Plus additional demolition costs.
Yes.
Councilmember
Brittany has a comment.
Councilmember Bills.
Hey, Andy, can you do the same fence, so it looks the same, whether it's concrete or the foam core, and let people decide how much they want to pay? Because it seems like it's the same on the outside.
Yeah, but what are we worried about the long-term structure of things?
I feel like if we help them replace it, then it's on them to decide what they want to do.
In a general sense, yes, most of the fencing companies have similar patterns. If you want an identical look, the only way that you'll get identical is to choose the exact same fence. But most of them have a pattern that's at least reasonably comparable, meaning like the exact brick layout pattern, the exact brick layout won't be the same unless you just pick it. It has to be this manufacturer, this fence, but they do look similar, as you all observed when you took the walk to Spring Creek. I mean, you saw the two fences that were fairly similar in pattern, and if you were standing back 100 feet and weren't paying super attention, you'd say that's the same fence, right? But if you got up and observed the details, there is differences, but you can certainly get them similar enough that if you're driving past going, 35 or 40 or 45 up Alpine Highway, you're probably not going to notice some of the micro differences.
As for me, I'm shifting 180 degrees here. I'm worried about the durability. I'm wondering if we should go to the solid fence just for durability's sake. Sometimes money costs too much, and if we just try to nickel and dime it, we end up not really having a long term what we want. And this foam core sounded like a great idea. We visited one in that one park. It looked great. Didn't have this kind of damage, but seeing this kind of damage from something as minimal as an edger, unless those are steel blades on there, that's pretty delicate, and it worries me. I'm worried about our decision. I think maybe we need to revisit it, and if we revisit it, I think we need to look at the 5 versus the 3 in a row. But
I apologize. I should have been better informed to give you guidance that night. You asked me, is it a good fence? And I just had to look at it and say, I don't know. I don't have a lot of experience with it. And so I apologize. Yeah. I wasn't better.
I appreciate Ron's comments. I agree with him. It may be better just to do the solid one for long-term durability.
Are we able to just progress through the colors real fast? I don't know if the thing's working now. Okay, good. So Rob, I'll let you finish on the color.
There's various options to make it look. It's still concrete or a concrete cover. You can make it look like stone. There's a kind of a reddish one. There's different colors.
Rob, can you just make sure you're at the mic?
Sorry, and you get closer. And we also have fans. So it was more just, did you like a specific color where we leave it like a gray or a beige or brown, or do you prefer the more stone look where there's multiple paints used on there?
I prefer the stone look.
I like the picture number 78. If you can click on 78.
One more after that, yeah.
I like 78 and the one on the right.
The one thing that I will note from the city side is the 78, the one on the right that the mayor was noting he'd
I like
like.
that one too.
The one reason that all the city's fences are monocolor that the city maintains is because if there's graffiti, it's a lot easier to touch up. It's tougher to touch up one of these multicolored sections like you're looking at there. If it gets graffiti, you just wipe out the whole panel, start again with whatever that standard color is.
I agree with the mayor. That's my first choice.
Which one?
Be like 78 on the right.
78.
The one with the.
Can you go back to 78 on the right?
It's kind of a beige, or no, kind of a yellow.
That right there.
Kind of that earth stone look color in that range. Seeing enough nods that majority, at least, of
What's
that
everyone's
color.
feeling on the paint color on this? I mean, is there
I can agree with that. Maybe if people drive up there before they come to council, they'll be more serene.
But do we need a motion
Kind of mellow
to
yellow.
change our
We can't.
previous decision?
This was just communication,
Oh,
so.
okay. But we do have at some point, we've made a decision.
we have, if you're going to change that
We've got
decision,
it.
then they have to come
So
back.
we need you to come back in August with a change.
Is there?
Can't we make it administrative?
Oh.
Administrative.
Decide what the fence is made of, since we voted how many
Just-
times?
I mean,
don't
it's
feel
simple
it's
enough. If
within
all
my
you want to do
job description of city council to be choosing fence colors.
I thought it was
because
planning
this
commission.
program is managed by the council and you're spending the city's funds on it, we could administer it. We just don't want to do it in a way that the council doesn't want going
fine.
forward with this fence.
As
Well,
fun as
we
it is to
appreciate
watch
that.
Kim and Scott duke it out about colors sometimes,
Okay.
I'm super indifferent.
I didn't know
I
we
like
were
the one on
duking
the
anything
Well,
out
you
about
did
color.
the one time about Ridgeview, right?
Oh, true.
Yeah.
You know I don't like brown. Uh,
And then is there support to bring this back to discuss the fence material?
Yes.
yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we
So
need
we
to
need
decide
Okay, we're
that.
now going to move on to traffic calming toolbox, and that will be
Okay.
Andy.
Next slide. Okay, I'm mindful of time. I will spend as much time as you all would like to go through those. I just want to give you an update on what we've received and what we're doing. Now, part of the trick on this was the council said go back and pick up those that you're currently working on and give those attention, right? And so that's kind of the others below. And tonight, either Councilmember Rodella or Bill's noted Carly Tall's neighborhood. They have spoken up since, but they haven't turned in the actual request since we studied theirs. But I could add theirs to the list. I don't have any problem with that because they've certainly been talking to us over the course of time with this. But we received a request from a citizen group on 6000 West near the elementary. They felt like people were speeding. They suggested, the study found that we ought to do driver feedback signs and look at some bump outs, where the pedestrian crossing points are. So we've implemented and put one driver feedback sign there. We're trying to figure out how to put them in the vicinity of the school. We were hoping to talk to UDOT and figure out if we can actually combine them with the school zone signs. We'd like to do that. We talked a little bit about what I call the cut through to Westfield Road from Beacon Hills Drive. We're currently studying that area. That is one area that they had requested speed tables. And that one generally is what they're saying is that people cut through to avoid the intersection of Beacon Hills Drive and 11800, cut through the neighborhoods if they're going to the east. So we're still studying that one. 6000 West and 10400 North. We talked about this one last time or 2 times ago when you said, what's your most important intersection in town? And I said, well, this one and the one that we talked about on 6000 West. Basically, the residents are noting there's no crosswalks. My hesitation in putting crosswalks is not because I don't think the kids need them. It's because then I'm putting a crosswalk to put them onto an uncontrolled shoulder. And for some liability reasons, I've been a little hesitant there. But I don't disagree with the residents that area intersection needs attention. I just would love to be able to put them in a safe spot, put them on a crosswalk and put them on a safe spot. Because by putting a crosswalk, we imply if you go here, it's safe.
Would you guys like Andy to go through all these? I'm not trying to be rude, I'm just trying to.
Whatever you want. I'll go as fast or slow, or we can skip on to the next ones.
If we can get a copy of this, I'm okay with going through it.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah,
After the
Appreciate
fact.
your
What you
work
got?
on it.
Yep.
We're now
I'm
moving
good.
on. Okay, thank you, Andy. I'm sorry, I didn't.
You're fine.
I know
There's a lot to
of
cover.
information.
There's a lot to
Okay,
cover.
Next one is accessory structure restrictions at Ridgeview, and this is Scott.
Mayor, so the last few items, I know we continue to bump them, but we wanted to get through the first
I'm
two because
okay
Andy
bumping-
was
Are
here.
you guys okay bumping Scott? I'm okay bumping sign. We do need to have it by August. So we can,
Yeah, I'd like to talk about it at some point, but we don't have to do it tonight. It's just kind of, we don't want pool houses turning into rental apartments.
Correct.
Is the bottom line, yeah.
so why don't we see if we can, I know August 6th, everything gets kind of busy. Is there anything else on here that needs to be discussed? 'Cause we got closed session.
When is the?
There is something on community development updates that we need to, or a couple of things actually. So.
And what's on the item immediately before that? What's the deadline for the annual? We're still well out
January.
from that. Okay.
So I will bring up maybe my item. No, yes.
Community development or
community development stuff. So just so you're aware, we have a request. You got the conversation from the resident who came tonight talking about his business occupation. So he filed a text amendment to allow for employees to work from a home occupation as long as they front onto SR 92. There's some conditions and limitations that even he was supportive of. Just giving you the heads up, that's what he was requesting.
And so the
The other
council will be
thing,
seeing this on August 6th?
August 6th. The other major thing I wanted to ask about, when we did the whole fence code update, the one item you asked us to bring back was fencing on double fronted lots where you have a street on two sides of the lot. Would you like us to bring that back for action on August 6th? I know there's been some discussions with different residents about that. We wanted to get the council's input how to proceed with that item. We're good to bring it back for August 6th if you'd like us to and have a discussion on that for an action.
Personally, I'd prefer to see them pursue a variance in this case and only address it through code if that doesn't work in that case. But I think I'm a minority on that one.
Yeah, the reason I think why Doug's saying variance is the others have went in and sought a variance, were granted a variance, right? Rob, are we thinking right?
One has.
So that is an option they could go through.
It's not as clear cut in this case as in the one that was granted, but it seems like a potentially viable option.
Another, I think, option is the possibility of grandfathering. Say we've got 4 years. Chris put that in 5 years ago. We've got 4 years to find out there's been a violation on a fence before we require a resident to tear it down. After 4 years, it's just a potential way to solve this. Should there be a limit? Can we go back 20 years and say, you put a fence up 20 years ago, you got to tear it down because it doesn't meet our current code? It just doesn't seem right.
My only
Like
thing
we should
is
have
if
some
there's a
grandfather.
safety issue, then I think you've got to.
Yeah, if it's safety, I agree with that.
It sounds like there's still just discussion to be had on this, so let's bring
I
it
think
back.
let's bring it
August
back
6th.
for discussion item on August 6th
And then
because
the
I'd
last
like to know
item-
more.
Great. Is Andy's for Highland Boulevard.
Oh, sorry. We are working with D.R. Horton on the design for Highland Boulevard and the islands. Sorry, we're trying to get to a picture here. The big question is the council wanted islands because you wanted the beauty of the islands. And so what we've looked at is there's an intersection at Brunswick. And if you're coming from the north, headed south, if you're going to go to those neighborhoods that are just south of there, you can turn in at Grant Drive. I'm going to show you two pictures. One with a little teeny skinny island that leaves a left turn in at Brunswick, and one that takes away the left turn in at Brunswick but actually gives some landscape there. So you'll notice the intersection we're talking about is highlighted in red, and the island's just kind of one of those little teeny skinny islands like we just put on Canal Boulevard. That leaves a left turn into Brunswick. Next picture. Okay, so if you take away the left turn into Brunswick, you can actually put that much landscape that's shown in the green. But that does take away the left turn into Brunswick. On the staff side, we think that the council will want the green one here because you'll notice that we need to leave a left turn into Highland Oaks south of there. And so we took a look at it and said, you know, the point of the council was not to have just a bunch of skinny islands in this area. The point of the council was to have some landscape. But it's really difficult with all the accesses to have the landscape. But we think that if you look at Brunswick, we think for the most part, coming from the south. So you'd still be able to make a left turn out. You just wouldn't be able to make a left turn into Brunswick if you're coming down Highland Boulevard from the Draper side. But we think that doesn't represent much of a loss, because if you're going to make a left turn into your house, you can just turn at Grant and navigate into your house.
Correct.
It's a lot more aesthetic presentation, but wanted to get the feeling from the council, because if we take away movements from a given neighborhood, we really want the input of the council.
So let me make a comment real quick. I agree with your thinking here, Andy. And you know, we've talked about putting these medians in different things as they act as traffic calming as well. And so it just seems logical, because that's another road where we've had people drive 100 miles an hour. And so we're putting the roundabout to kind of slow that, but I think your median strips, not only they're beautiful, but they kind of calm the traffic. And again, you know, this is an area where there's been deaths and all kinds of problems because people drive and speed too much. So I agree with the green option.
Okay.
Do you have any data or experience just looking at it on the screen? I'm unconvinced that that's going to prevent people from turning left onto Brunswick. And by setting it up that way, nobody is expecting them to turn left.
As far as data as to the effectiveness of the configuration, or data as to how many people are turning left?
Of that sort of, I mean, I'm assuming this is something that is a relatively common
If
thing.
people are determined this won't stop them. If you want to stop them, you need to overlap the islands. But in this case, we didn't want to make something that was too difficult for the fire truck to turn out of Brunswick, because I'm not. You know, I don't know how often they visit the Brunswick neighborhood. It's a seniors community there, but we want to make sure there was plenty of room for them to turn out. What we looked at is that it probably didn't represent that much of an imposition to the neighborhoods, and we really didn't think there was that much demand, because if you go back 2 slides, Brooklyn, can you go back to slide 93? If you look at it, this little intersection of Brunswick, it only really serves that senior neighborhood there. Otherwise, all the people that are getting served from the greater Sky Estates neighborhood are really getting served off Grant. And so we looked at it and said, you know, this left turn, there probably is not a whole lot of demand, and what demand is there could be served through Grant. And so that's where we looked at it and said, not much loss in mobility, big gain in landscape, and actually to address Councilmember Smith's point, yes, it will be an increase in traffic calming, because
Chief Patton, real fast on this item. I don't know if you've been.
Go
This is
to
coming
95.
This is coming off of coming down Draper. How often does Draper do a response call down to this senior area there? Are we responding, or do you see them coming off of that South Mountain coming down? Oh. Hold it. You're not going to that senior area? They're in Highland. Okay.
That's why they're not going, not that they wouldn't.
Yeah, okay. You're just not getting calls. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
I hear them going up Highland Boulevard all the time. So.
That's right.
Okay, it's 10 o'clock. Do we hit? Okay, we need now a motion to go into closed session.
For the purposes of recently imminent litigation and the potential acquisition of real property.
Aye.
Second. Aye.
Aye.
We're now in closed session. Thank you for coming. I'll just go through the fling and voting. We can just go through.